over at ThomHartmann.com, we've got some really cool stuff. A lot of people don't realize that we produce a daily newsletter, and Sue puts we call it Sue's Daily Stack on there, which is literally a link to every story that I've talked about in the show. So all the research is right there. It's free. We don't share or sell our subscriber list. It's there's just it's there. It's there for you. And it's over at ThomHartmann.com. You can sign up for the free newsletter. You also can get my big picture take of the day, which is exclusively over at our website at ThomHartmann.com, as well as links to our videos, the book reports we typically do every day, all this stuff and more. It's all there at ThomHartmann.com. So check it out and sign up for our newsletter. I think you'll really enjoy it and appreciate it and find a lot of value there. We put a lot of work into this stuff. And you'll find it all right there on our website at ThomHartmann.com. And be sure to check out the newsletter and sign up for it. It's great. In the Thom Hartmann Book Club today, our book is by Frantz Fanon, and it's The Wretched of the Earth. This is from the chapter on national culture on page 145. It sort of reads like Thomas Paine, actually. Each generation must discover its mission, fulfill it, or betray it in relative opacity. In the underdeveloped countries, preceding generations have simultaneously resisted the insidious agenda of colonialism and paved the way for the emergence of the current struggles. Now that we are in the heat of combat, we must shed the habit of decrying the efforts of our forefathers or feigning incomprehension at their silence or passiveness. They fought as best they could with the weapons they possessed at the time. And if their struggle did not reverberate throughout the international arena, the reason should be attributed not so much to a lack of heroism, but to a fundamentally different international situation. More than one colonized subject had to say, "We've had enough." More than one tribe had to rebel. More than one peasant revolt had to be quelled. More than one demonstration had to be repressed for us to stand firm, certain of our victory. For those of us who are determined to break the back of colonialism, our historic mission is to authorize every revolt, every desperate act, and every attack aborted or drowned in blood. In this chapter, we'll analyze the fundamental issue of the legitimate claim to a nation. The political party that mobilizes the people, however, is little concerned with this issue of legitimacy. Political parties are concerned solely with daily reality, and it is in the name of this reality, in the name of this immediacy which influences the present and future of men and women, that they make their call to action. The political party may very well speak of the nation in emotional terms, but it is primarily interested in getting the people who are listening to understand that they must join in the struggle if they quite simply want to exist. We now know that in the first phase of the national struggle, colonialism attempts to diffuse nationalist demands by manipulating economic doctrine. At the first sign of a dispute, colonialism feigns comprehension by acknowledging with ostentatious humility that the territory is suffering from serious underdevelopment that requires major social and economic reforms. And it is true that certain spectacular measures, such as the opening of work sites for the unemployed here and there, delay the formation of a national consciousness by a few years. But sooner or later, colonialism realizes it is incapable of achieving a program of socioeconomic reforms that would satisfy the aspirations of the colonized masses. Even when it comes to filling their bellies, colonialism proves to be inherently powerless. The colonial state very quickly discovers that any attempt to disarm the national parties at a purely economic level would be tantamount to practicing in the colonies what it did not want to do in its own territory. And it is no coincidence that today the doctrine of Cartierism is on the rise just about everywhere. Cartier's bitter disillusionment with France's stubborn determination to retain ties with people it will have to feed, whereas so many French citizens are in dire straits, reflects colonialism's inability to transform itself into a nonpartisan aid program. Hence, once again, no need to waste time repeating, better to go hungry with dignity than to eat one's fill in slavery. On the contrary, we must persuade ourselves that colonialism is incapable of procuring for colonized people the material conditions likely to make them forget their quest for dignity. Once colonialism is understood where its social reform tactics would lead it, back come the old reflexes of adding police reinforcements, dispatching troops, and establishing a regime of terror better suited to its interests and its psychology. Within the political parties, or rather parallel to them, we find the cultured class of colonized intellectuals. The recognition of a national culture and its right to exist represent their favorite stomping ground. Whereas the politicians integrate their action in the present, the intellectuals place themselves in the context of history. Faced with the colonized intellectuals' debunking of the colonist theory of a pre-colonial barbarism, colonialism's response is mute. It is especially mute since the ideas put forward by the young colonized intelligentsia are widely accepted by metropolitan specialists. It is in fact now commonly recognized that for several decades, numerous European researchers have widely rehabilitated African, Mexican, and Peruvian civilizations. Some have been surprised by the passion invested by the colonized intellectuals in their defense of a national culture. But those who consider this passion exaggerated are strangely apt to forget that their psyches and their egos are conveniently safeguarded by the French or German culture, whose worth has been proven and which has gone unchallenged. I concede the fact that the actual existence of an Aztec civilization has done little to change the diet of today's Mexican peasant. I concede that whatever proof there is of the once mighty Songhai civilization does not change the fact that the Songhais today are undernourished, illiterate, abandoned to the skies and water, with a blank mind and glazed eyes. But as we have said on several occasions, this passionate quest for a national culture prior to the colonial era can be justified by the colonized intellectuals' shared interest in stepping back and taking a hard look at the Western culture in which they risk becoming ensnared. Fully aware that they're in the process of losing themselves and consequently of being lost to their people, these men work away with raging heart and furious mind to renew contact with their people's oldest inner essence, the furthest removed from colonial times. Let us delve deeper. Perhaps this passion and this rage are nurtured, or at least guided, by the secret hope of discovering, beyond the pleasant wretchedness, beyond the self-hatred, something that redeems us.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And greetings, my friends, patriots, lovers of democracy, truth and justice, believers in peace, freedom, and the American way. Thom Hartmann here with you. Quite a day. In our third hour, we're going to be talking with one of the organizers of what's going to be a massive march on Thursday, in all probability, assuming that the cover-up artist, Bill Barr, continues to refuse to allow even Congress to see the Mueller report, much less the American people. And a bunch of groups are getting together and showing up for that. In the second hour of our program today, Pramila Jayapal is going to drop by. It'll be about 20 minutes past the hour, and she's going to take calls for the rest of the hour. So if you have questions for the co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus and, a major star in the Democratic Party, get ready. And in this hour, I want to start out by, well, first of all, just a little news. The fact that white supremacist terrorists have killed more Americans than any other terror group since the late 90s. And I would say probably since the 70s. White extremist terrorists have killed more Americans than any other terror group in the United States. You may have to pull 9/11 out of that equation as an anomaly, but I don't think so now if you look at it in this larger arc. Therefore, Donald Trump and the Trump White House today pulled the plug and said, that's it, no more in the Department of Homeland Security, no more working group essentially on domestic terrorism. DHS's domestic terror unit eliminated by the Trump administration because, quote, it is not a priority. Meanwhile, some just startling news about health care. Americans borrowed $88 billion last year to pay for health care. We are literally the only developed country in the world where people borrow money to get health care. We are the only developed country in the world where people experience bankruptcy, over 600,000 of them last year, or as a consequence of somebody getting sick. The number of bankruptcies as a consequence of sickness in Canada last year, 0. Last decade, 0. Any European country, pretty much all European countries, 0. Other countries around the world that have healthcare, Japan, Taiwan, 0, right? Australia, 0. In the United States, 600,000 last year. And Americans borrowed $88 billion to pay for health care. Tennessee just knocked 128,000 children off TennCare. This is the program that's an expansion of Medicaid. You know, you get a Republican government, and that's what happens. I mean, this is pretty much exclusively happening in red states, in Republican states. Alabama is doing it, Mississippi is doing it, Tennessee is doing it. You know, states where Republicans control, they are figuring out ways to deny people health insurance. And an interesting piece in the New York Times today. 48% of voters worry about paying their health care bills. 66% of people who are sick are worried, and 49% are very worried about what the Republicans might do. And half of all people in America who get sick in any given year have a problem paying their medical bills over the course of that year. So Donald Trump and the Republicans now tell us that they have a secret plan. Seriously, a secret plan that they're going to unveil sometime after the 2002 elections. I mean, seriously, right? If you're old enough to remember the election in 1972, and you know probably some of us are, and if you're not, you need to be sure to tell somebody younger about that. The way that Nixon, I mean, the Vietnam War was raging in '72. The Watergate burglary had just come to light, but the investigation had just started. And Nixon's whole thing was, I'm going to end the war in Vietnam. Now, keep in mind, he's the guy who extended the war in Vietnam in '68 by committing treason and blowing up the peace deal that LBJ had worked out with South Vietnam and North Vietnam. He blew that up. He continued the war for 4 years. Another couple tens of thousands of Americans died. Probably another million Vietnamese died. And then Nixon came out and he said, you know, just like tens of thousands of Americans are dying for lack of health insurance and health care. And then Nixon came out and said, well, I've got a secret plan to end the Vietnam War. And I can't reveal the details, of course, because that's the whole point of a secret plan. But don't worry, right after the 1972 elections, we will be able to quickly end the war once the elections are out of the way and it's no longer politicized. Because George McGovern was running on this campaign of, I'm going to end the war. Nixon's like, no, I'm the president. I can do this. I got this under control. And people believed him. And they reelected him. And so now Trump is coming out and he's saying, well, you know, we're working on a plan. We've got a plan. It's a secret plan. In fact, the right-wing newspaper, and there's this right-wing newspaper in Washington, D.C. It's called the Washington Examiner. I'm pretty sure they give it away for free. Funded by, billionaires or big corporations or God only knows what. And the headline, White House working on secret health care plan with 3 conservative think tanks. This is, positive good news in their mind. It's by Emily Ward. The White House is quietly working on a health care policy proposal to replace the Affordable Care Act, according to multiple sources with knowledge of the matter. They told the Washington Examiner that they're working with the Heritage Foundation, the Mercatus Center, and the Hoover Institute. Trump said on Tuesday, Republicans would soon be the party of health care. Right. The actual secret plan that we just learned about this week, and by the way, my question for the hour, essentially, my question for you is, do you think that Trump is going to get away with this? Will the Republicans be able to pull this off? And if so, how? And if not, why? Because they did it in '72 and it worked. And, one of Nixon's principal advisors back then was Roger Stone. And, he's still good buddies with Donald Trump. But the actual secret plan, there actually was a secret Trump health care plan that was put together before the election and was nailed down after the election and before the inauguration. And Senator Bob Casey held up 3 Republican appointees, put holds on them, in order to force the Trump administration to give him a copy of this secret plan. It was a 10-point plan to destroy Obamacare, to destroy the Affordable Care Act. And Bob Casey literally just got a copy of it. This was from a meeting that was held on March 23rd, right after Trump was inaugurated president. And, you know, it looked like the Republican efforts to destroy the Affordable Care Act were chaotic and, you know, just willy-nilly. Turns out it was actually quite well organized. They had this 10-point plan, including cutting the sign-up period in half for Obamacare. This was all designed to destroy Obamacare. Give states the ability to allow and to determine whether insurers actually had to provide all the benefits that Obamacare required. See, Obamacare says, for example, you have to pay for birth control. You have to pay for routine examinations. They actually save money over time. Well, now in a Republican state, they could say, no, you don't have to pay for that. Or you have to pay for cancer therapy after it costs $1 million. Oh, no, you don't have to pay for that. Another part of it is to encourage the states to build less robust exchanges than required by Obamacare. Make it harder for people to sign up. Prevent healthcare providers from steering patients to Obamacare plans. So if you go to your doctor and you say, geez, my insurance company is killing me. I can't afford this. And right now the doctor can say, well, have you checked out the Obamacare plans? They're subsidized. It's much less expensive. Trump wants to put a gag order on this, just like, you know, some doctors in some states can't say, oh, well, you know, you're pregnant, you can get an abortion. Here's where you can go. The gag rule. By the way, in this meeting where Mick Mulvaney, Tom Price, and members of the House Freedom Caucus, Mark Meadows has been championing this. These are, I call them the Cokehead Caucus, right? These are the guys who take lots and lots of money from the Cokes and the Coke Network and the whole right-wing thing. One of our listeners one of our regular listeners who was over on Facebook this morning had a suggestion for the new name for that. And I thought I had that person's, oh yeah, it was Kurt Scammell. And he says that it should be called the Pay Out of Pocket Plan. The GOP Pay Out of Pocket Healthcare Plan. I tweeted this out this morning. Hashtag, right? Pay out of pocket. P-O-O-P. Sure enough, the Republican healthcare poop plan. Seriously, well, not seriously, but that's really, other people were kind of responding on Twitter with other acronyms that spelled out words that I can't say on the radio. And but this is it. I'm wondering if this is actually going to, in a big way, help the Republicans. Just to take a serious, sober look at this for a moment. The thing, according to all the exit polls, that caused Democrats to take back control of the House of Representatives in the election last year was health care. You know, they looked at the Trump administration. Trump had said, I'm going to give you better health care at a lower cost. He didn't even touch the topic in the first 2 years other than to do everything he could to damage Obamacare. And the Democrats were saying, we're going to give you health care, Medicare for all, whatever. We're going to fix it. And Americans were like, okay. But there's still a lot of Trump voters out there, right? They voted for Trump the first time. They voted for a Democrat 2 years later. And Trump is going to come along in 2 more years and say, hey, vote for the Republicans this time. We've got a plan. They'll roll out something. Remember when Newt Gingrich came out with his contract on America? It had 10 points. 6 of those 10 points pointed to one piece of legislation, which was a tax cut for rich people. Several of the other ones pointed to another piece of legislation that was a tax cut for corporations. You know, it was pointed out in the newspapers, but it didn't stop them from marketing it. We've got this 10-point plan. And every one of those points was a benefit statement. It didn't have the features. It didn't have the details. I'm telling you, the Republicans are going to do this again. They're going to say, here's the plan. They're going to give it a nice name. It's going to be a BS plan, just like the contract on America was. And I think that it may take the wind out of the Democrats' sails. What do you think? 18 minutes past the hour.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Are they going to get away with repeating Nixon's 72 strategy, only this time around health care instead of war? And welcome back. Deanna in Lancaster, California, listening on KPFK. Hey, Deanna, what's up?
Oh.
You are on the air.
Thank you. I live in Lancaster, California. I live in a Republican cesspool. You are my church. Every day I listen to you to keep the faith.
Well, thank you, Deanna.
And get the truth. And in Vietnam, they have single-payer insurance.
Really?
In Vietnam.
Wow.
They're now producing food and producing products. I'm buying things from Vietnam. I just wanted to let you know we're the laughing stock of the world with our health plan.
Yeah, we're the village idiots, the world's village idiots. It's absolutely
I worked
true.
at UCLA. I've been around medicine since 1950. I've seen it go right into the dumpster. It's a greedy place now.
Yeah.
We have fake cancer medicine out there now.
Yeah. Oh, there's all
And
kinds
they
of
know it's
scams.
fake.
But the biggest scams, in my opinion, frankly, are the pharmaceutical industry, you know, big pharma, and the so-called
That's right.
health insurance industry. These guys are just banksters, and they're raking in literally billions and billions of dollars. Yeah, it's a terrible situation. Deanna, thank you. Thank you for sharing your story.
Are you still vegetarian?
I am still vegetarian.
You're still vegetarian.
Well,
Me
actually,
too.
let me put a caveat on that. A couple times a year, I've been eating fish, although I'm debating stopping that. But
you better.
Yeah,
God, I just had lamb. I just had lamb from Australia.
Uh-oh. Well, then you're not a vegetarian,
I trust
Deanna.
that.
Yeah.
Well, once a year, I feed my soul once a week.
There you go. I suppose moderation in all things, although, you know, Louise and I were just absolutely rigorous about it from the time we were 16 or 17 years old, which was a long time ago, up until, I don't know, maybe a decade ago when we moved to Portland, and then we started eating salmon maybe once a month. But I've really, you know, I'm thinking of just, but we pretty much took all the dairy out of our diet a couple of years ago, and it's been a big help, I think, for everything from, you know, weight to blood pressure to just general feeling good. So
I did this in 1966 when they laughed at us going into the health food store and getting carrot juice.
Yeah, I became a vegetarian in '68.
Yeah. The police tried to close down Lang's Health Food. They were afraid the carrot machine was contaminated.
You're kidding?
And the government prevented us from buying large amounts of vitamin C.
The war on vitamin C and carrot juice.
Yes, yes.
That's absolutely incredible.
Back in the 60s, 70s. My late husband and I went across the border for cancer treatments. Mm-hmm. He died in 72. I smuggled Laetrile across the border.
Oh my, I remember Laetrile.
I have been fighting the AMA and staying alive. I'm 78 years old now.
Oh, good on you.
I'm still fighting.
Yeah. Good on you, Deanna. Thank you very much for the call. It's great to hear from you, and thanks for listening to KPFK. Phew, wow. We all have such extraordinary, so many people have had, I mean, you know, we all have extraordinary experiences. Some are probably more worthy of sharing than others, but when you have been around for a while, you get it, that wisdom is actually a real thing, and that it's the combination of knowledge and experience. And experience comes with time. It's real simple. We'll be back with more of your calls, your thoughts, and mine on whether the Republicans will get away with this, on what's going on with DHS saying, hey, it's not a priority to have a domestic terrorism task force. And, and I want to get to what the Supreme Court did yesterday. Stick around. So CNN reporting 1 in 8 Americans borrowed money to pay for health care last year. 65 million Americans are in debt as a consequence of this. Nearly 25% cuts of spending to afford care and medicine. 76% of people expect their costs to go up in the next 2 years. 7 in 10, 70% of Americans lack confidence in our leaders. That would be across the board. So what I'm seeing, and by the way, there's other topics, too, that we're going to get to as we continue through the day. One of them that I wanted to mention is that Monday the Supreme Court said that you have no constitutional right to die a painless death at the hands of the state. This is absolutely bizarre. The Eighth Amendment, I believe it is, bans cruel and unusual punishment. Putting people to death in a way that causes extraordinary pain and agony. I don't know any other definition of cruel and unusual. And yet the right-wingers on the Supreme Court have come out and said, oh, no, that's just fine. Somebody's twisting in pain because of these god-awful drugs that they're shooting them up with or whatever. That's no problem. This is all very, very weird. Lawrence in St. Paul, Minnesota, listening on AM 950. Hey, Lawrence, what's up?
Well, great topic today, right on point. But I would like to add, we might be witnessing the disillusion of the Democratic Party. I'll tell you why. You were just talking about this in your last segment, that the Republicans, they are at war. Now, whether you believe it or not, that's up to you. But they are definitely at war. Some of the followers on the Republican side, they want a race war. Lee Atwater, he said, I want to take the government so small that you can drown it in the bathtub.
Yeah, that was Grover Norquist, but yeah, I'm with you.
I'm sorry, Norquist, yeah. So these are all tenets of war. They know how to wage war, and this is why the Democrats will lose, because the Democrats got a great strategy, a strategy of providing health care, a strategy of making income inequality go away, but they don't have any tactical advantage. The first thing you do in war is cut off your opponent's ability to wage war. And this is how you do that, Tom. Unless you cut off the listeners of Fox, you have to cut them down, and you got to eliminate them, or else you would never gain a tactical advantage. But how do you how do you cut them off? You cut them off by educating them. That's the irony of this whole thing. You must educate them.
Yeah.
And I'll let you comment on that.
No, I think you're absolutely right, Lawrence, and it's a brilliant analysis. And in fact, I would take it a step beyond that. I would say not only are the Republicans waging war, and not only have they read Sun Tzu like you apparently have, but where this kicked off was during the Reagan administration when he declared war on organized labor, because a third of America had a union job, and the principal supporters of the Democratic Party back at that time were the unions. That was the principal financial support for the Democratic Party. The Republicans are getting their money from Wall Street and from the big banks and from the National Association of Manufacturers and the Chamber of Commerce and all this kind of stuff. And the Democrats were getting their money out of the unions. And Reagan destroyed the unions. Union membership in the private sector is down to 6% now. It was over 30%, when Reagan came into office. So they cut the funding to the Democratic Party. And I would say that the way to cut funding to the Republican Party is to pass strong legislation that gets money out of politics. And some of that is going to require a constitutional amendment, because the right-wingers in the Supreme Court with Citizens United have said, no, this is a constitutional right of a billionaire to own a politician. But you're absolutely right, Lawrence. The Republicans are waging war, and the Democrats are trying to govern. And there's a difference. Thank you, Lawrence.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
You see, the GOP has no interest in governing. They never have. They never will. They just want to tear things down. They want to destroy this country, and which they're doing right now. Club book today is Last Boat Out of Shanghai by Helen Zia, the subtitle, The Epic Story of the Chinese Who Fled Mao's Revolution. This is from the prologue, Shanghai, May 4th, 1949. Bing sat up straight in the pedicab, gripping the hard seat as the driver cursed and spat. She watched with alarm as his feet, clad in sandals cut from old tires, seemed to slow to a snail's pace just when she most needed speed. This stylish-looking young woman had imagined that her last hours in Shanghai would be spent waving farewell from a ship's deck to envious onlookers below as a river breeze gently lifted her dark hair, just as she'd seen in the movies. After all, she was about to leave China's biggest, most glamorous, and most notorious city. But now, with the imminent threat of a violent communist revolution, she was running away again, along with half the city's population, it seemed. And instead of standing at the rail exchanging smiles with the ship's other passengers, she was stuck in traffic, terrified that she wouldn't reach the Shanghai Hongqiao wharf in time. That would spell disaster. She lurched forward as the pedicab driver stood on the pedals of his three-wheeled cycle and came to a stop. Around her was a sea of other pedicabs, rickshaws, cars, buses, carts, and trucks, all screeching and honking, their drivers yelling every manner of obscenity. The cacophony reverberated against the walls of the stone and concrete canyon of Nanjing Road. Bing was no stranger to Shanghai's mayhem, but she'd never seen anything quite like this. Of all times to be stuck in such bedlam, on the very day she had to get to the riverfront, the date set for her departure from this desperate city. She'd sewn her floral print quipois for this special occasion. Each careful stitch had captured her growing anticipation. With her oval face, big eyes, and full red lips, all crowned by a tiara of black permanent waves, the 20-year-old might have been mistaken for a coy Shanghai poster girl, but for the panic in her eyes. Like her, everyone in Shanghai seemed to be in a frenzy to escape, to use any means to get away from the impending arrival of the communists. But unlike those who were still clamoring for a seat to anywhere, Bing was one of the lucky ones. She possessed a precious one-way ticket out on a ship to America. Finally, the driver managed to break through the crush. He harangued everyone in his path, shouting, "Move along, you worthless mule scrotum, smellier than pig farts." She didn't blink at his choice of words, which came as naturally as breathing on Shanghai's streets. She didn't care as long as she got to the wharf. The ship's smokestacks came into view just past the stately Astor House Hotel and the towering 19-story Broadway Mansions apartments, where the Xinjiao Creek meets the bend in the Huaihangpu River, the last major tributary of the mighty Yangtze River before it joins the East China Sea. Massive granite buildings, all in European style, lined the signature waterfront boulevard and docks. To the foreigners, this prime section of waterfront was known as the Bund, from a Hindustani word meaning embankment. The Chinese called it Waitan, meaning outside or foreign shore, a reference to the foreigners who once ruled this proud imperialist showcase of Shanghai. British and American businessmen had wrested away the best sections of the port city with the full support of the government. Land and sovereignty had been ripped from China, spoils of the opium wars that had forced the narcotic onto China 100 years before. Everything about these monuments to international capitalists and pale big noses seemed foreign, including the British Big Ben chime of the giant clock tower over the customs house. Soon it would be up to the communists to decide what would follow, what would happen to these grand stone edifices. Shanghai was China's most modern, populous, and cosmopolitan city. One of the leading metropolises of the world, the Paris of the Orient was also home to tens of thousands of foreigners who were despised by imperialists by the Communist Party and its leader, Mao Zedong. The city was the launching point for major inland routes and international traffic, whether by boat, plane, train, or wooden cart, making it the epicenter for the massive exodus in the late 1940s. Stoked by the anticipated communist victory over the nationalist government headed by Chiang Kai-shek, panic and terror had first infected the wealthiest, most educated, and most privileged classes and sent them running in what they fully expected to be a brief exile. It was assumed that the communists would target the rich and the pampered in the same way that the Bolsheviks had gone after the Tsarist White Russians, many of whom had come to Shanghai as refugees from that 1917 revolution. No one knows precisely how many people fled Shanghai during the early years of the Communist Revolution. Scholars and journalists have estimated that more than 1 million people set off from or through that port city. Many of those who ran for the exits belonged to the city's capitalist and middle classes, who presumably had the most to lose under the communists. These two groups comprised about 5% and 20%, respectively, of the city's 6 million residents, or about 1.5 million people. On the other hand, the remaining 4.5 million, who made up Shanghai's majority, saw no need to escape. They included Shanghai's industrial workers, coolies, drivers, the destitute. But it was not only members of the upper classes who fled. They were joined by old regime loyalists, from high nationalist government officials to lowly foot soldiers, as well as those who simply got caught up in the frenzy or were especially fearful. Unfortunately, there are no records of the exodus, since the retreating nationalists destroyed as many documents as they could, while the incoming communists inherited a country in such disarray that no accounting of the departures is known to have taken place. Last Boat Out of Shanghai by Helen Zia.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
So Donald Trump tweets last night, vote will be taken right after the election when Republicans hold the Senate and win back the House. It will be truly great health care that will work for America. Yeah, we're going to hold that vote right after the election, suckers. Just like Nixon did in '72. But here's the thing. Americans bought it in '72. I think you could say just like '96, actually. I believe it was '96, maybe it was '94, whichever year it was that Newt Gingrich rolled out his contract on America, which really just pointed to a couple of, kind of Koch-funded bills or suggested bills that were mostly massive tax cuts on billionaires, and said, oh, these wonderful, we're going to do these 10 wonderful things. And it was a scam. But it got the Republicans control of the House of Representatives. And I'm telling you, they are rolling out another one right now. John in Riverside, California. Hey, John, what's up?
Hey, Tom. Can you hear me?
Just fine.
Yes, Tom. You may know me formerly as John from Punta Gorda.
Okay.
Do you remember? Anyway,
yeah. Welcome back,
to the
John.
West Coast.
Thank you.
I too live in the. Thank you. I too live in the West Coast, California now. I thought you moved here after me, which is I've been here about 6 years.
Yeah. No, I'm sorry, John. I need to stick to the topics here. Richard in Kent, Washington. Hey, Richard, what's on your mind today?
Thanks for taking my call, Tom.
Sure.
As far as the Republican health care plan, I have a slogan for it for us.
Okay.
If you're not healthy, we don't care.
Well, unfortunately, that's that's the situation. I mean, when Ron Paul was part of the field looking for the Republican nomination, this is, 10, 12 years ago, something like that, and the CNN questioner, I think it was John King, said, or no, it was Anderson Cooper, said, if a 36-year-old guy is, injured outside the emergency room and he's dying on the street, how should his health care be paid for? And Ron Paul goes into this thing about, well, when I was a doctor, I used to have people pay me with chickens. Or, people did back in the day. I mean, it was basically, yeah, freedom in our mind is the freedom to die in the ditch like a dog, And so, yeah, I'm with you. Richard, that's a good one. Thank you. And thanks for listening to KBCS. Regina in Olympia Fields, Illinois. Hey, Regina, thanks for listening to Chicago's Progressive Talk. What's up?
Hi, Tom. I just wanted to make 2 quick points. The conservatives are not going to win this one. Back in Nixon's day, we thought presidents were presidential, but now we know that Trump is a known liar as of today, 9,451 times. So knowing that he's a liar and having all this information out there about his lying, I don't think he's going to win that one. And number 2, as far as winning the war, we have some Xena warrior princesses out here right now, like AOC. We're waging war.
Yeah.
Maybe men are not waging war against the cons, but women are fired up and ready to go. Health care is a very important issue for our families, and we're not going to just take this land down. So
I get it, Regina, but here's the situation. You've got about a third of Americans who are getting their news from Fox News, and these committed Republicans, and they literally do not know that Donald Trump lies at typically a dozen times a day, and has lied over 9,000 documented lies. They don't know the history of this. They are going to be spoon-fed, and you've got another probably 15 million Americans who listen to right-wing talk radio every single day, and they are being, actually the number's probably much larger than that, and they're being spoon-fed this story that, hey, the Republicans have got this great new health care plan, and as soon as the political noise settles down after the election, they're going to roll it out and put it into place. So just trust us, and we'll make this thing happen. And then you've got about another third of Americans who are so busy working 2 and 3 jobs because of the Reagan Republican destruction of the American middle class that they literally, I mean, they don't have the time to even watch the news, much less pay attention to nuance like, whose health care plan is better and what, is there even really one there? And so I'm concerned, Regina, that this is a discussion and a debate that's happening largely within the left-wing bubble, as it were, on progressive blogs and in the intelligent, among the intelligentsia, people who actually read the op-ed sections of the New York Times and Washington Post, which is a very small number of people actually, and that he's going to get away with it.
Well, I don't think so, because what's happening is there's more of us than them right now. And so I do think that health care is a major issue, and we know this guy lies. And as far as all the Republicans out there, I mean, they're going to vote Republican no matter what happens anyway. Yeah. And we know we fought a civil war, so those same people that fought for the Confederacy is going to always be with us. We can't focus so much on them as it is moving up and increasing our ranks. And I know we're out here right now. There's an election, local elections, and everybody's talking about it. So,
good.
If we can keep talking about it, and women in general, especially black women like my group of people, we're really into the whole angry black woman thing. Okay? We're getting angry now. Yeah. And so if we can rise up and vote in droves, even some of the women who traditionally have not been so vocal, they spend their time watching Jerry Springer, we're beginning a whole effort to knock on their doors and say, listen, wake up. So I think that, we're riled up. That's all I can say as far as the population of people that I'm a black woman, so we're fired up.
That's great. And God bless you. And I hope that I hope that you're right. I truly do. Regina, thank you so much for the call, and thanks for listening to WCPT. Mary in Bainbridge Island, Washington. Hey, Mary, what's up?
Well, I was remembering when I was an adolescent and being in some of the public health clinics in the Bay Area, and there's a sign on the, sorry, that's my dog.
That's okay. We can't hear him. You can just keep talking.
Okay, the Hill-Burton Act was mentioned there, and it seemed like it was that hospitals were given some kind of leeway to build more or something, and so that then I think that's how people came to believe that you could go to an ER and be treated for free, because I think that's what that was about.
You're talking about back in the 80s. This was passed during the Reagan administration.
I think it was earlier than that, because I think it was in the late 60s.
Oh, okay.
It might have been in the 70s, but it seemed to me that was one of the ways, whether it was Reagan or Nixon or whoever, but it was the Republicans for sure. And so to remind us that there's lots of ways that people can get around this stuff. And well,
this was the argument, Mary, that Republicans have made for years and years, that Ronald Reagan himself used to make, is that everybody in America right now has access to health care because it is illegal for an emergency room to turn people away if they can't pay. And that's the Republican definition of access to health care. You can go to an emergency room, and has been their definition for 40, 50 years. And, my recollection is it was put into law during the 80s. Yours as it was before then. You may well be right. But in either case, they're still singing that. They're literally still singing that song, Mary.
Oh, I know, and I don't think it's true anyway.
Yeah, I agree, and because if you go to an ER and say, I think I might have a little lump here or something, and I'm kind of concerned about it, they're going to say, come back when it's bleeding. You are not in an emergency. So.
Oh no, I've been to emergency rooms where they said, okay, that's $75 up front.
Oh, geez.
So. But I'm just saying that there's lots of ways that some of this has been manipulated over time, and the Republicans keep playing a song that doesn't actually exist anymore, and.
Plus, they get you with the hospital. It's not. I don't know about ERs asking for money up front. I think that's illegal, but it's not impossible.
Oh no,
but certainly the ambulance. I mean, people get taken to the hospital, to the emergency room by ambulance, and they think, hey, it's an emergency, and then they get a bill for like $3,000 for the ambulance ride, and it's
and that's including Medicare, because I'm on Medicare, and I went into the hospital recently with an ambulance because I have cancer, and that's what happened is I got a bill from the ambulance from the Medicare.
Right.
Yeah, well, I was just shocked.
Yeah, it was just a whole separate thing. Mary, thank you for the call, and thanks for sharing your experience and wisdom with us. David in Woodland Hills, California. David, you're on the air.
It's not just the Republican Party. One of the best things Jefferson Smith said last week was, this is organized money's war on democracy, and that's worldwide.
You're absolutely right.
Fox News is worldwide.
Yeah, in fact, there's a fascinating article in the Sydney Morning Herald, or whatever, I think that's the name of it, that was written by Kevin Rudd, who is the former Prime Minister or President, Prime Minister, I think is the title, of Australia. And the title of the article is The Cancer on Australian Democracy. And the cancer that he's referring to specifically was Rupert Murdoch. He said Rupert Murdoch owns more than 50% of all the newspapers in Australia today. And Rupert Murdoch rose to power. He said in his article, and you can find it easily online, in his article, and in fact I've written about it in articles that I've published, in his article, Kevin Rudd, the former Prime Minister of Australia, says that Rupert Murdoch isn't just a billionaire and isn't just a media figure. He basically runs a political movement. And that movement captured the conservative part of Australian politics. And then Murdoch moved to the UK and bought the Times of London and bought a whole bunch of different media outlets, The Sun and all these things in the UK. And then he destroyed British politics, supporting Thatcher and the whole, right-wingification, the privatization of everything from the railroads on down in the UK. And then he moved to the United States, became a U.S. citizen, started Fox News, bought the New York Post, bought the Wall Street Journal, and is doing this to the United States. And, it's like a billionaire. He's a billionaire, and he's programming Fox News to cause average working people, average and low-income people, which is, a lot of the viewers of Fox News, right? Poor people in red states, to cause them to think that whatever's best for the billionaires is the best thing for them. And it's absolutely crazy when you think about it, but people are buying this stuff. And I think you're absolutely right, David, and Jefferson was right too. And by the way, I don't know if I explicitly thanked Jefferson yesterday for filling in for me. I'm not sure that I did. Jefferson, if you're listening, thanks so much. You did a great job. I've gotten so much great feedback, and I really appreciate it. We'll be back with more of the news of the day and your calls right after this. It's 46 minutes past the hour.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
We'll be right back. Stick around, occupying the media 3 hours a day, 5 days a week, right here at the Thom Hartmann Program. And welcome back. Judy in Pine, Colorado. Hey, Judy, thanks for watching Free Speech TV. What's on your mind?
Hi. I think Republicans are completely going to get away with it. We have a news media that supports all their lies by not putting out the facts. And we have the Democrats that refuse to impeach Donald to start the process, and they have been helping him all along. They support him in overthrowing Venezuela. They support him in prosecuting Julian Assange and WikiLeaks. They support him, or they supported Israel with the BDS law that bans freedom of speech for the BDS movement. Democrats are helping Donald all along. And
you mean by not fighting him more aggressively?
Our elections are completely rigged. Republicans own the computer program that count the votes. Democrats do not have a clue. They do not understand anything, and they just continue the same garbage.
I think that is changing, Judy. I would not have strongly disagreed with you a couple of years ago. I've been doing this show for 15 years. Maybe 16 now, but I really think that that's changing. I think that people are waking up. I think that the Democrats are starting to fight back. I think AOC is one of the real warriors in that crusade. The Democratic Progressive Caucus has picked up the challenge. We're going to have Pramila Jayapal on for about 40 minutes in the next hour, taking calls from people, on whatever they want to talk about. She is absolutely one of the warriors in Congress. I'm not sure that they're going to get away with it, but I'm very concerned. I'm genuinely very concerned. Judy, thank you for the call. Sam in Asheville, North Carolina. Hey, Sam, what's up?
Well, I think I've figured out why the mass media, which is corporate-owned, and why the Republicans are doing what they're doing and why they put Trump into power. Now, Jimmy Carter, a few years ago on your show, said we are living now in an oligarchy.
That's correct.
And this is true. It looks to me, for all the world, like what they're trying to set up is an absolute dictatorship in this country. If you look at what happened in Germany in the 1930s, there were riots. The Nazis were actually going out and starting a lot of these riots, and they were shooting people. Hitler stood up and said, I can save you. I can restore order to this country. This appears to me what is happening in this country. If it looks like a duck, and it waddles like a duck, and it quacks like a duck, and it smells like the stuff that a duck leaves when when you're walking behind one, then it's a duck. And I'm not really a conspiracy theorist, but I cannot really come to any other conclusion other than the super rich in this country want to control everything.
Well, and you have to wonder if there really is a conspiracy that deep. And you know, I get it that you think that, and I'm not
sure looks that way.
I'm not willing to dismiss it. But if there really is, but let me get this thought out, Sam. If there really is a conspiracy that deep, is this decision by the Department of Homeland Security to suspend their investigations of white right-wing domestic terrorists part of it? Is that part of that? Let's create chaos in the streets so that we can ride in and save people, as you just described happened in Germany.
Sure looks that way to me, unfortunately.
Yeah, I could build I think a credible scenario where that's the case. I hope that that's not the country I live in, but that's tough stuff. Stan, thanks a lot for the call. We'll be back with more of your calls, more of your thoughts and mine right after this. It's coming up on 10 minutes before the top of the hour. Welcome back. 51 minutes past the hour. Just a heads up, Pramila Jayapal, their office just sent a note to Sean saying that the schedule for Congress today of when votes are going to happen just changed, and she may not be able to show up when we were expecting her to at 20 minutes past the next hour. So it may be some other time today, or maybe later in the week, or or it may be on time. We'll find out. But just to keep you up to date. Denise in Richmond, California. Hey, Denise. Thanks for listening to Tune In.
Hi,
what's up?
Tom. How's it going? Hey, listen, I got 4 ideas here that I think Dems need to concentrate on. One is to come up with a regulation to define what's news and what's entertainment, for them to specifically target supposed news. And so they need to say, come up with, I guess, the FCC and involve journalists to come up with some ideas for that. So that they can just try to say, hey, instead of Fox News to be considered news, it should be entertainment.
Yeah, here's the problem with that, Denise. If we give the power to government to determine how a news media identifies itself or what they say, and that government gets fully taken over by Donald Trump and Mitch McConnell and their buddies, and in the House, with Kevin McCarthy, and then they decide that, for example, this program or Amy Goodman's Democracy Now!, which I think is the best newscast in the United States right now, they decide that, because we have a left-wing bias, we're not news. I'm really concerned about that.
The reason why I was saying to include journalists, they themselves come up with the idea. But the thing is to determine news to be newsworthy that has at least three resources, just like you have for newspapers and stuff.
Yeah, well, it depends on the paper. Typically,
like that. But not to
typically a double source.
Really have. Yeah, but I'm just saying, but to have the journalists, to have them.
Sure, have the industry police itself. I have no problem with that, with the industry policing itself. Yeah. Although even then, here's my concern, Denise. There's a difference in my mind between journalism and acts of journalism, or between professional journalists, people who go to college, they study journalism, they become professional journalists, they are quote credentialed and all that kind of stuff, or they work for the Washington Post or the local newspaper, and there's no doubt that that person's a journalist. On the other hand, what if a blogger who has, who's posting blogs at opednews.com, that will basically, has a large variety of folks. It's very easy to get a blog posted over at opednews.com, a progressive blog, and it's a great site. It's run by a good friend of mine, Rob Call. And what if a person, just an individual who's never done any other kind of journalism, discovers some incredible story, knows some whistleblower inside the government or something, posts that on Op-Ed News, and that, so they have committed an act of journalism, but none of the, quote, self-policing news organizations, Google, Facebook, the Associated Press, the New York Times, none of them will pick it up. None of them will even refer to it because that person is not officially a journalist. I think that we need to protect acts of journalism rather than just journalists.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying there. But what I'm trying to do is somehow, some way, that was just kind of an idea, but somehow, some way, we need to regulate false information that Fox News is disclosing. So the reason why I'm saying this is because I was looking at on Facebook, and this guy, he says, I hope Trump repeals Obamacare because my insurance already comes from Affordable Care Act. Now, that person obviously is listening to Fox News. He's wearing a Make America Great hat.
Yeah, that
concerns me. That really concerns me. So somehow, some way, we need to come up with something. That was just an idea. Okay, the second thought I was thinking is revise the emulsion clause. We need to have something that fine-tunes that, locks it in there, so that all of our presidents won't have the same issue again. We need to not keep revisiting.
To clarify the emoluments clause of the Constitution through legislation. Yeah, I'm with you on that. I'm with you.
Okay, and then revise the general attorney's job description. Exactly what's happening with Barr is unacceptable.
Yeah.
For him to step in to make a decision for the Congress to submit a stupid letter of memo of four pages.
Well, the problem here, Denise, is that during the Watergate era, they passed legislation to create a separate office of a special prosecutor or an investigator. I forget exactly what the phrase that they used, but what Archibald Cox was, and then later what Ken Starr was. And that person was independent, legally independent of the Justice Department. So, and their job was to deliver their report to Congress. So they were created by, no, let me finish the thought. They were created by Congress and they reported to Congress. The Republicans didn't like that law, and they were always trying to get rid of it. And then when that law was used in Ken Starr case against Bill Clinton, the Democrats also didn't like that law. And so they got together and they said, let's kill off this law. So when it came time to investigate Trump, there was no legal structure that was responsible to report to Congress. And the Republicans were not going to create one because they controlled Congress when Trump was elected. So what happened was the Justice Department, in response to public demand for an investigation, created their own special counsel or independent counsel or whatever Mueller's official title is, as a person operating inside the Justice Department. As such, he's an employee of the Attorney General. And so he reports to the Attorney General, not to Congress. So what all we have to do is get back that independent counsel law that we used to have, because right now Bill Barr is completely within his power to say, this report was done in my department by one of my underlings, which Robert Mueller actually is, and I'm going to choose not to release it. And frankly, I don't think he's going to release it before the next election. Denise, thanks for the call. We'll be right back. It's hitting the top of the hour here.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
From UN.
We say fight back!
over at ThomHartmann.com, we've got some really cool stuff. A lot of people don't realize that we produce a daily newsletter, and Sue puts we call it Sue's Daily Stack on there, which is literally a link to every story that I've talked about in the show. So all the research is right there. It's free. We don't share or sell our subscriber list. It's there's just it's there. It's there for you. And it's over at ThomHartmann.com. You can sign up for the free newsletter. You also can get my big picture take of the day, which is exclusively over at our website at ThomHartmann.com, as well as links to our videos, the book reports we typically do every day, all this stuff and more. It's all there at ThomHartmann.com. So check it out and sign up for our newsletter. I think you'll really enjoy it and appreciate it and find a lot of value there. We put a lot of work into this stuff. And you'll find it all right there on our website at ThomHartmann.com. And be sure to check out the newsletter and sign up for it. It's great. Our book club selection today is the brand new book from Dar Jamail, The End of Ice, Bearing Witness and Finding Meaning in the Path of Climate Disruption. The dedication of the book. This book is dedicated to the future generations of all species. Know that there were many of us who did what we could. This is from the introduction. The fall lasts long enough that I have time to watch the blue ice race upward, eons of time compressed into glacial ice, flashing by in fractions of seconds. I assume I've fallen far enough that I've pulled my climbing partner, Sean, into the crevasse with me. This is what it's like to die in the mountains, a voice in my head tells me. Just as my mind completes that thought, the rope wrenches my climbing harness up. I bounce languidly up and down as the dynamic physics inherent in the rope play themselves out. Somehow, Sean has checked my fall while still on the surface of the glacier. I brush the snow and chunks of ice from my hair, arms, and chest and pull down the sleeves of my shirt. Finding my glacier glasses hanging from the pocket of my climbing bib, I tuck them away. I check myself for injuries and incredibly find none. Assessing my situation, I find there's no ice shelf nearby to ease the tension from the rope so Sean can begin setting up a pulley system to extract me. I look down, nothing but blackness. I look at the wall of blue ice directly in front of me, take a deep breath, and peer up into the tiny hole into which I'd fallen when I'd punched through the snow bridge spanning the crevasse. The same bridge Sean had crossed without incident as we made our way up Alaska's Matanuska Glacier toward Mount Marcus Baker in the Chugach Range. You get to look down one more time, then that's it, I tell myself out loud. Again, there's only a black and void yawning beneath me, swallowing everything, even sound. My stomach clenches. I remind myself to breathe. Sean, are you okay? I yell as I clamp my mechanical ascenders to the rope in preparation to climb up. Yeah, I'm all right, but I'm right on the edge, he calls back. I can't set an anchor to get out of the system, so don't ascend. We're going to have to wait for the other guys to catch up. Time passes. The onset of hyperthermia means I can't control my body from periodically shaking. To ignore my fear of dying, I gaze meditatively at the ice a few feet in front of me as I dangle. The miniature air pockets found in the whiter ice near the top of the glacier have long since been compressed, producing the mesmerizing beauty of centuries-old turquoise ice. Slightly deeper into the crevasse is ice that has been there since long before the Neanderthals. I hang suspended in silence, mindful not to move out of fear of dislodging Sean. Giving my full attention to the ice immediately within my vision, I focus on how the gently refracting light from above seems to penetrate and reflect off the perfectly smooth wall. Staring into it, the blue seems infinite. Despite the danger of my situation, the glacier's beauty calms me. Delicate snowflakes and their infinite possibilities of form land on mountainous terrain. Under its own weight, the snow is compressed into glaciers that scour and shape the face of the earth. Countless millions of tons of weight, aided by the force of gravity, push and pull these frozen rivers downhill, carving out cirques and troughs from uplifted geologic plates and sculpting the majestic heights of mountains that I have been drawn to since I was young. Eventually, our other two teammates arrive and work to extract Sean from his perch just 6 inches from the edge of the crevasse. All three of them set up a three-way pulley system. Laboriously, my teammates begin to haul me up, inches at a time, out of what nearly became my tomb. I continue to focus on the delicately shifting blades of blue in the ice as I draw closer to the surface, mesmerized by its raw beauty. My teammates pull me up to the lip of the crevasse. I repeatedly plunge the pick of my ice axe into the snow and haul myself out, never before as grateful for being on top of a glacier. I stand and gaze up at the mountain to the west, behind which the sun has just set. Snow plumes stream off one of its ridges, turned into ruddy red ribbons by the setting snow. Snowflakes flicker as they float into space. As relief floods my shivering body, I roar in gratitude and relief. Utterly overwhelmed by being alive and surrounded by the beauty of the mountain world, I hug each of my 3 climbing partners. Now safe, it sinks in how close to death I've been. That was Earth Day 2003. In hindsight, I believe the emotion I felt then stemmed in part from something else, a deeper consciousness that the ice that I had seen, which had existed for eons, was vanishing. 7 years of climbing in Alaska had provided me with a front row seat from where I could witness the dramatic impact of human-caused climate disruption. Each year we found the toe of the glacier had shriveled further. Each year for the annual early ice season festival on this glacier, we found ourselves hiking further up the crusty frozen mud left behind by rapidly retreating terminus. Each year the parking lot was moved closer to the glacier, only to be left further away as the ice withdrew. Even sections of Denali, which stands over 20,000 feet tall and is roughly 250 miles from the Arctic Circle, had undergone startling changes. The ice of its glaciers was disappearing quickly. Our planet is rapidly changing, and what we are witnessing is unlike anything that has occurred in nature or even geologic history. The heat-trapping nature of carbon dioxide and methane, both greenhouse gases, has been scientific fact for decades, and according to NASA, there is no question that increased levels of greenhouse gases must cause the Earth to warm in response. Evidence shows the greenhouse gas emissions are causing the Earth to warm 10 times faster than it should. And the ramifications of this are being felt quite literally throughout the entire biosphere. And then, he goes on, oceans are warming, etc. The End of Ice by Dar Jamail.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. The White House, as we've been talking about for the last hour, the White House says that, and Donald Trump tweeted late last night, earlier he'd said, the Republican Party is going to be the party of health care, and this is going to be our big issue in the 2020 election. And now he's saying, but the plan is secret. It's a secret plan. In fact, the Washington Examiner, the right-wing newspaper in Washington, D.C., headline by Emily Ward, White House working on secret health care plan with 3 conservative think tanks. Yeah, the Mercatus Center, the Hoover Institute, the Heritage Foundation. Trump's secret plan to scrap Obamacare over at Politico is a little different. It points out that there actually was a secret plan to destroy the Affordable Care Act. And Congressman Bob Casey, the Democrat from Pennsylvania, or Senator Bob Casey, excuse me, by putting a hold on 3 different Trump appointees, finally forced the Trump administration to deliver this 10-point memo that was part of a meeting back in March. This was after back in March after Trump was inaugurated, after he became president, that included Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell. And in this meeting, they laid out these 10 things that they were going to do to destroy Obamacare. Now, nothing to replace it, just to destroy it. Tom Price was there, Mick Mulvaney was there, a bunch of guys from the Cokehead Caucus, the so-called Freedom Caucus. They wanted to encourage states to build less robust exchanges for Obamacare, prevent healthcare providers from steering patients to Obamacare plans, gag rules for doctors like they do for abortion. If you tell a woman that she can get an abortion or where she can get it, we're not going to pay for your, we will not fund you, right? No more Medicare, Medicaid, whatever it may be. They want to cut the sign-up period in half. They want to give states the ability to say, we'll exempt you, insurance company, from having to cover everything like Obamacare requires. You can sell policies now that don't cover cancer. You can sell policies that don't cover pregnancy. You can sell policies that don't. You pick what you don't cover birth control. So the question is, and that we've been dealing with here in this hour, and then I want to add a few more things to the plate. The question is, will the American public buy this secret plan? Now, that question may sound ridiculous on its face, right? Particularly after the last election was apparently, according to the exit polls, a referendum on health care. But think about it for a minute. Newt Gingrich brought the Republicans to control of the House of Representatives in the middle of the Clinton administration. I don't recall if it was the election in 94 or 96, but I think it was 96, but whatever it was. Newt Gingrich brought in the Republicans with his so-called contract on America. I think he called it Contract for America. I called it the Contract on America. And 6 of the 10 points, and it was like, you know, we're going to increase transparency and we're going to, you know, boost the economy and we're going to, all these things. 6 of the 10 points pointed to one piece of legislation that was simply a tax cut for billionaires and corporations. It was a scam. The Contract on America was a scam. And the Republicans never did anything of consequence that was, you know, for the average workers. You know, they cut regulations, they cut taxes, but they didn't do anything for you and me. In fact, they made life a hell of a lot harder for average working people. But Americans bought that scam, and for at least I think maybe 6 years, kept reelecting these Republicans. And then back in 1972, Nixon did the same thing. And you'll recall in '68, I mean, we just learned this a year or so ago when when the LBJ Library released the tapes of LBJ, the secret tapes of LBJ talking to Everett Dirksen during the election of 1968 about how Richard Nixon had reached out, or his campaign had reached out to the South Vietnamese and said, you know, that peace deal that LBJ just cut between you and North Vietnam that you're going to sign in Paris in October. That peace deal is all worked out. Stop it right now. Wait until after the election. Richard Nixon will make you rich. He'll get, you know, we'll work out the same deal or a better deal, and we're going to take care of you. And LBJ says to Everett Dirksen, this is treason, Everett. And Everett Dirksen says, yeah, I know. So, you know, Nixon committed treason to become president, and then in '72, you know, he hadn't ended the Vietnam War. He ran on a platform in '68 of, I'm going to end the Vietnam War. He hadn't done it in '72. And so in '72, he ran for re-election on a platform of, I now have a secret plan to end the Vietnam War, but I can't tell you about it until after the election, or it'll get politicized. The Democrats will just turn it into hash, right? They'll screw it all up. I can't talk about it. And the American people bought it. I mean, he was running, as I recall, he was running against George McGovern, who was going to end the war. That was the whole thing. George McGovern was going to end the war in Vietnam, and so Nixon said, ignore McGovern. I'll end the war. Don't worry. I'm the president. I know how to do this stuff. I got Henry Kissinger here. We're on it. We got a secret plan. And he got reelected. The American people bought it. The American people, we have a history of buying BS from the Republicans. These phony promises for secret plans that are going to wonderfully step into place after the election. Remember, you know, before Donald Trump was elected, he said, elect me, and after the election, I'll bring back jobs from China. I'll provide everybody in America with health care. I will cut taxes on working people and raise taxes on billionaires and corporations. We're going to strengthen good union jobs. Remember that? I mean, you know, he went through a whole list of promises. All of them were lies. And all of them were things he was going to do after the election. And now the Republicans are saying, hey, we've got a new plan for you. It's a secret until after the election, but it's a new plan. And I predict that Heritage and Mercatus and Hoover, these right-wing think tanks funded by billionaires and big corporations, these right-wing think tanks are going to come up with the healthcare equivalent of Newt Gingrich's Contract on America. You know, a 10-point plan or something like that. That's all in marketing. The terms are features and benefits, right? Benefits are what's in it for me. Oh, this will make you, you know, this new widget will allow you to widget twice as fast. And the features are how it happens. Well, how does it happen? Well, it's a 32-digit widget instead of a 16-digit widget, right? So the details. And benefits are what sell, but features are what give credibility. So the details are what make people believe it. The benefits are what make people want it. And with the Contract on America, it was just benefits, no details, no features. And with Nixon's, I'm going to end the war in 72, just benefits, no features. Just what's in it for us, no more war. No, here's how I'm going to do it. I predict that Trump and the Republicans are going to pull this switcheroo, the old rope-a-dope, the old okey-doke. They're going to pull this thing again. And I predict that the Republican voters are going to buy it. The Democratic voters are going to see it for what it is. And the scary thing is that 30% in the middle, who are only marginally paying attention to the news because they're working 60, 70 hours a week just trying to put food on the table. They're only half paying attention. That they will get the benefit statement from the plan that Trump is going to roll out with no there, and believe it, and the Republicans are going to take back Congress. I mean, I'm seriously concerned about this. Americans are very, very concerned. I mean, right now, this, from the New York Times, deductibles from 2008 to 2018, over a 10-year period, deductibles rose 8 times faster than wages. 43% of all insured Americans said last year, or in 2017, excuse me, it was difficult to pay their medical bills because of the deductible. 43%. That was up from 34% just 2 years earlier. Insurance companies are sticking it to us. And Obamacare is taking the blame for it because the Republicans are saying, well, that's who is responsible. Americans borrowed $88 billion last year to pay for health care. No other developed country in the world does that. Tennessee just knocked 128,000 kids off Medicaid. Alabama, they're knocking 15, 20,000 people a month off. Mississippi. I mean, this is happening in state after state after state. So there's that. The other issue I wanted to mention to you is this My Last Shot hashtag. This is, I think, absolutely amazing. You will recall, those of you who listen to the program regularly or have for a long time, that I've been saying for years and years, that when the American press begins showing pictures of slaughtered children in a school, we're going to get gun laws the next week. This is what happened in New Zealand. New Zealand this week rolled out this is done deal, right? These are laws now. No more semi-automatic weapons, period. You have until September to turn in your guns. You will be repaid generously, but you no longer can possess these kinds of weapons. No problem if you got a rifle, a pistol that's a revolver, a normal kind of gun. But semi-automatic weapons are treated just like automatic weapons now in New Zealand. And frankly, I think they should be here in the United States. And I've been saying our unwillingness to show the pictures of what this does. Think back to the tobacco lobbies. Think back to the whole tobacco thing, right? The whole in the late 90s. It was when the anti-tobacco crusaders began showing pictures of people ravaged by tobacco, the toothless, all that, and these horrible lung disease pictures. The people started taking it seriously and going, oh my God, that's what lung cancer looks like. So now there's this movement that's being led by the young people out of Columbine High School. It's a hashtag My Last Shot. And Kaylee Tyner told CNN, she was the founder of this thing, that she was inspired by the death of Emmett Till. His mother said, we're going to have an open casket funeral. He was, of course, murdered and beaten, just brutally beaten by these white racists. His face was so disfigured. And when that picture was published in Jet magazine and then it went around the world, it galvanized the civil rights movement and led to real change in America. And Kaylee Tyner is saying, this was my inspiration. She said his parents insisted the world see the imagery of his death. And she's saying, if I am shot, I want the pictures of my bloody body to be out there in the damn newspaper. And a whole bunch of other people are signing up.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
In fact, they're printing little stickers that you can put on your ID, My Last Shot, that says, put my picture out there. I want to be seen if I'm killed by guns. Welcome back. Katie in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Hey, Katie, what's on your mind today? Thanks for watching Free Speech.
Hey, first-time caller, long-time listener.
Thank you, Katie.
I love your show.
Thanks.
I was look. Our local newspaper has like a right side editorial and a left side editorial, and the right side editorial, of course, it talks about right-wing things, but one of the things that caught my attention, I read this every day. One of the things that caught my attention was an article that the editor wrote about 2 weeks ago, and he says that 2020 Democratic nominees should be hoping no one is paying too much attention to the international news because Finland has collapsed over its inability to reform its health and welfare programs, and that Sweden and Denmark are also having similar problems. And I thought, well, I hadn't heard anything about that. As a matter of fact, I've heard people call your program and say that they had great health care when they lived in
It's simply
Finland.
not. It's simply not true, Katie. There's no collapse going on in Scandinavia.
Oh, okay. Well, he's telling the readers here in Chattanooga that that if you think that Medicare for all would work, then the Scandinavian countries that Bernie has been commemorating because of how well they handle their health care are collapsing because of it. So
that's incredible. That is absolutely incredible. Let me just do a quick search here on Finland collapse and see if this is a new if this is a new right-wing meme, because that's absolutely fascinating. Yeah. Oh, Finland's government collapses weeks before the general election. Oh, well, that has nothing to do. Oh, here's one over failed health care. Oh, the health care reform. Basically what is happening is they're having a debate about how to improve their system. And one part of the government is saying do it this way, another part is doing it that way, and they can't achieve a consensus. Collapse doesn't mean that the government is the country's going down in flames. It means that you're having, is basically, are the Democrats or the Republicans going to be in charge? This is fascinating stuff.
He's turning it, spinning it, making it sound like that this could happen to us.
Yeah, Finland's Prime Minister Juha Sipilä resigned Friday morning, 1 month ahead of the election. He said one of our most important objectives was social welfare and health care reform. He said we can't. It has a decentralized system where much of the administration is left to local municipalities, and so there's a lot of variation. Some areas get better health care services than others, and what they were trying to do was create national standards so that everybody had really great health care. And, apparently everybody has, generally great health care, but it's not as good in some of the more rural areas. So it was an attempt by the federal government to take it over, and Parliament wouldn't go along with it. And so this is the kind of government where when the phrase government collapse means that basically they're calling for an election. The prime minister is saying this is essentially a vote of no confidence, and I'm going to call your bluff, and we're going to have an election, and we're going to let the people decide. Since the parliament won't decide, we're going to let the people decide. But this is not a collapse of their system, and this is not a collapse of their government. This is a normal and healthy political process that's going on in Finland right now. I would encourage you to Google it and read it. There's a great story about it on Politico that I was just reading just now. And you may want to write a rebuttal to his right-wing editorial. That's nuts.
That's exactly what I plan to do.
Okay, good on you, Katie. Thanks a lot. Great talking with you. We'll be right back. Hey, over at ThomHartmann.com, we've got some really cool stuff. A lot of people don't realize that we produce a daily newsletter, and Sue puts we call it Sue's Daily Stack on there, which is literally a link to every story that I've talked about in the show. So all the research is right there. It's free. We don't share or sell our subscriber list. It's it's there. It's there for you. And it's over at ThomHartmann.com. You can sign up for the free newsletter. You also can get my big picture take of the day, which is exclusively over at our website at ThomHartmann.com, as well as links to our videos, the book reports we typically do every day, all this stuff and more. It's all there at ThomHartmann.com. So check it out and sign up for our newsletter. I think you'll really enjoy it and appreciate it. and find a lot of value there. We put a lot of work into this stuff, and you'll find it all right there on our website at thomhartmann.com. And be sure to check out the newsletter and sign up for it. It's great.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
And, you know, where is this going to go? Number one, this whole health care thing. Will the Republicans get away with it again? There was a comment, I tweeted this out over on Facebook this morning. One of our Facebook viewers, Kurt Scammell, said, you know, the words to the effect of, you know, we really should call this thing the Republican plan. It should really be called pay out of pocket, right? Because, I mean, that's, you know, they want to increase deductibles. They want to say there's all kinds of things that can be excluded. Health insurance companies don't have to pay for cancer. They don't have to pay for pregnancy. They don't have to pay for birth control. So pay out of pocket, right? That's the Republican plan. P-O-O-P. The hashtag poop plan. And, you know, and so I tweeted that, and people came back with less, you can say it on the air, acronyms, but and words to get to them. But anyhow, Steve in Evanston, Illinois. Hey, Steve, what's on your mind?
Hi, Tom. Listen, Tom, so you're talking about health care again. I've always wanted one thing. I'm a progressive, and I like a more progressive health care plan. But given that Republicans are people that tend to want to sabotage our government, what would happen if we won and we put health care under the government? Wouldn't they just have more power to sabotage our health care?
Well, that's what's happening with the Affordable Care Act. And it's happening in plain sight. And the question is, will Americans get it? I mean, are enough Americans well enough informed to realize that, you know, the Affordable Care Act is being sabotaged? It turns out that there was literally a 10-point plan to sabotage the Affordable Care Act that was part of a meeting in March after Trump was elected, that after he was inaugurated, that included Mick Mulvaney and Tom Price and you know, people from the so-called Freedom Caucus, the Cokehead Caucus, and they've already put into place 2 or 3 of these 10 points, and they are taking down Obamacare. And they're telling us, oh, but we'll have a better alternative after the election, and you know, just give us, you know, another 2 years, and we'll just, you know, and in the meantime, they're going to pack the courts like crazy, so they'll have a backup for all this stuff. I mean, it's just it's nuts. Steve, thanks for the call. From Steve to Steve in Zimmerman, Minnesota. Hey, Steve, what's up?
Hey, Tom, I was calling about the lady that got the sticker shock for the $3,000 ambulance ride.
Right, because you have to, the emergency rooms have to take you in, but, you know, even if you can't pay, but the ambulance companies will come after you forever.
Yeah, I just raised my $20,000 coverage to $50,000 because that's all you get, the max in automotive coverage for your health care.
Right.
And I had an accident on February 9th, and they gave me a ride to the hospital 50 miles away by helicopter, and that bill was $13,400.
Holy cow. Yeah, and it's out of pocket. Amazing. It's the poop plan.
You're
Thanks,
listening
Steve.
to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Pay out of pocket. That's the Republican plan. 28 minutes past the hour. We'll be back. It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from the Undercommons, Fugitive Planning and Black Study by Stefano Harney and Fred Moten. This is from the introduction. It starts with love, exchange, fellowship. It ends as it begins, in motion, in between various modes of being and belonging, and on the way to new economies of giving, taking, being with and for. And it ends with a ride in a Buick Skylark on a way to another place altogether. Surprising, perhaps, after we have engaged dispossession, debt, dislocation, and violence, but not surprising when you have understood that the projects of fugitive planning and black study are mostly about reaching out to find connection. They are about making common cause with the brokenness of being, a brokenness, I would venture to say, that is also blackness, that remains blackness, and will, despite all, remain broken because this book is not a prescription for repair. If we do not seek to fix what has been broken, then what? How do we resolve to live with brokenness, with being broke, which is also what Moten and Harney called debt? Well, given that debt is sometimes a history of giving, at other times a history of taking, at all times a history of capitalism, and given that debt also signifies a promise of ownership but never delivers on that promise, we have to understand that debt is something that cannot be paid off. Debt, as Harney puts it, presumes a kind of individualized realization to a naturalized economy that is predicated upon exploitation. Can we have, he asks, another sense of what is owed that does not presume a nexus of activities like recognition and acknowledgement, payment and gratitude? Can debt become a principle of elaboration? Moten links economic debt to the brokenness of being in the interview with Stefan Shukatis, who he acknowledges that some debts should be paid and that much is owed, especially to black people, by white people. And yet he says, I also know that it is, that what it is that is supposed to be repaired is irreparable. It can't be repaired. The only thing we can do is tear this stuff down completely and build something new, end of quote. The undercommons do not come to pay their debts, to repair what has been broken, to fix what has been undone. If you want to know what the undercommons wants, what Moten and Harney want, what black people, indigenous people, queers, and poor people want, what we, the we who cohabit in the space of the undercommons want, it is this. We cannot be satisfied with the recognition and acknowledgement generated by the very system that denies A, that anything was ever broken, and B, that we deserve to be the broken part. So we refuse to ask for recognition, and instead we want to take apart, dismantle, tear down that structure right now. That right now limits our ability to find each other, to see beyond it, and to access the places that we know live outside its walls. We cannot say what new structures will replace the ones we live with yet, because once we have torn stuff down, we will inevitably see more and see differently and feel a new sense of wanting and being and becoming. What we want after the break will be different from what we think we want before the break, and both are necessarily different from the desires that issue from being in the dark. Let's come at this by another path. In the melancholic and visionary 2009 film version of Maurice Sendak's Where the Wild Things Are, 1963, Max, the small seeker who leaves his room, his home, his family to find the world beyond, finds a world of lost and lonely beasts, and they promptly make him their king. Max is the first king the wild things have had, whom they did not eat, and who did not, in turn, try to eat them. And the beasts are the first grown things that Max has met, who want his opinion, his judgment, and his rule. Max's power is that he is small while they are big. He promises the beasts that he has no plans to eat them, and that this is more than anyone has ever promised them. He promises them that he will find ways through and around, and will slip through the cracks and re-crack the cracks if they fill up. He promises to keep sadness at bay and to make the world with the wild creatures that roared their terrible roars and gnashed their terrible teeth and rolled their terrible eyes and showed their terrible claws. That Max fails to make the wild things happy or to save them or to make the world with them is less important than the fact that he found them and he recognized in them the end of something and potentially the path to an alternative in his world, or an alternative to his world, excuse me. The wild things were not the utopian creatures of fairy tales. They were the rejected and lost subjects of the world Max had left behind. And because he shuttles between the Oedipal land where his mother rules and the ruined world of the wild, he knows the parameters of the real. He sees what is included and what is left out. And he is now able to set sail for another place, a place that is neither the home he left nor the home to which he wants to return. Moten and Harney want to gesture to another place, a wild place that is not simply the leftover space that limbs real and regulated zones of polite society. Rather, it is a wild place that continuously produces its own unregulated wilderness. The zone we enter through Moten and Harney is ongoing and exists in the present, and as Harney puts it, some kind of demand is already being enacted, fulfilled in the call itself. While describing the riots of London in 2011, Harney suggests that the riots and insurrections do not separate out the request, the demand, and the call. Rather, they enact the one in the other. The book is The Undercommons, Fugitive Planning and Black Study.
Want Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and Antoinette in Puyallup, Washington. Hey, Antoinette, what's up?
Hi. Well, hi, Tom. I love your show. Listen all the whenever I can. But last couple of times when I call, I always talk to you about the Citizens United Act, and our governor here in Washington is making his primary running platform on the Green New Deal.
Right.
I wish some run
Jay
on
Inslee.
the repeal of the Citizens United, because in my opinion, that's the most important thing, is to get the money out of the wrong hands. And I just wanted to remind you, I know you're old enough to remember Adlai Stevenson.
Mm-hmm.
Remember him?
Vaguely.
He won. Yeah, well, he was running against Eisenhower, and he was quite a liberal person, progressive person back then. And he gave a speech one day, and one of the people in the audience came up to him and shook his hand and said, "Mr. Stevenson, I thought I loved your speech. After that speech, every thinking person in America will vote for you." And he said, "Yes, son, but I need a majority."
Oh, geez, that's great. Was Stevenson who ran against Eisenhower in '56?
I think so. I don't remember exactly.
Yeah, I am not. I was a little kid then, and I frankly, I don't. In 1956, I was 5 years old, so I don't remember. But
I know you have such a great command of history. I thought you'd know everything.
Yeah, I don't know everything.
You don't know everything?
I definitely don't. Antoinette, thank you for the call. But that's a great Adlai Stevenson story, and it rings true from what I know of the guy. Antoinette, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Scott in Sheffield, Iowa. Hey, Scott, what's on your mind?
Well, I'm glad you brought up the big health care issue today. It's a great thing to be talking about.
Okay.
Here's my scenario, Mr. Hartmann. You ready?
Yep.
Hello? Hello?
I'm listening.
I'm a type 1 diabetic since 5th grade in school.
Mm-hmm.
I've got rheumatoid arthritis, diagnosed with that June of '09. I've diagnosed with severe coronary artery disease. March of '09, I had triple bypass.
Okay.
Now, my dad, bless his heart, he passed away in January of 2016.
Mm-hmm.
And through this, I inherited 40 acres of Iowa farmland. Now the damn government looks at me thinking, on paper, I'm worth $400,000.
Because that's the value of the farmland you inherited.
Right.
Yeah.
But so I don't get any dang subsidies at all to help pay for my insulin.
Oh, my.
And stuff.
And on top of that, in the United States, you're paying 3-4 times more for insulin than anywhere else in the world.
Right. And this is never, ever, ever talked about for people in rural Midwest. And please, when you have Mr. Pocan on, what is it, tomorrow? Or
yeah, no, it'll be tomorrow. Yeah.
Being from the Midwest, please have your congressmen, your Democratic congressmen, your Democratic senators on, and please tell them about this tragic thing about us people, because if there's a single mother out there who inherited 2 acres of farmland with 2 kids, she loses everything.
Right. I totally get what you're saying, Scott, and I completely agree with you. These things should not be means tested. You know, if number one, healthcare should be a right, not a privilege. And
nothing is ever said about people like me that inherited.
No, I get it. And number one, and number two, and we saw this when my mother died. When my mother had Alzheimer's, and she ended up, my brother Stan, God bless him, and his wife Cindy. It was just an amazing thing. They took my mother in and they nursed her with her Alzheimer's right up until the day she died. But we looked at putting her in a nursing home, and the thing was that Medicaid would not pay for it unless we basically bankrupted her. In other words, and her quote estate was only, was basically the house my dad had bought for $15,000 back in '56, and it was worth maybe $90,000. She had a net worth of probably $150,000 that, but we would have had to not just dispose of all that, but then wait 2 years before Medicaid would pay for the bills. And then even then, that money could be clawed back from her children. And I mean, it was crazy. That wasn't why Stan and Cindy took her in, but it was, just looking at it, I was just shocked that nursing home care is, you basically got to bankrupt somebody. It's like our entire healthcare system, even at end of life, seems to be built around bankrupting people. Scott, I'm with you. Thanks for the call and thanks for sharing your story. Sean in Stamford, Connecticut. Hey, Sean, what's up?
First of all, I want to say it was 1994 as far as when you're talking about the contract with America with Republicans that time because of that was the first thing. I know too. I love the poop reference. I love it. That was fantastic. And the third thing was the one who called at the bottom of the previous hour about journalism. One thing that's happened now is the internet is a great resource, but what's allowed is you can't always tell the good information from bad.
Right.
It becomes much more difficult to decipher what is true, what is false, and it causes a lot of confusion.
Right. So do you have a solution for this?
I wish I had one because it's like I read a lot about medicine, and all of a sudden you find there are all these like fake cures out there.
Oh yeah.
There's a great website I read, and it's like, oh, I didn't know about this, and I'm like, wow, I didn't know. There are a lot more minefields out there that we didn't know about.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, Sean. It's like the new business model in America has become run a scam. I mean, whether it's the drug companies, the health insurance companies, the banks, they're all running scams on us, and it's just terrible. Sean, thanks for the call. Sabrina in Denver. Hey, Sabrina, what's up?
Oh, hi. I was actually calling earlier about the conversation you were having regarding white supremacists being taken off the watch list.
Yeah, this just for people who might have just tuned in, Sabrina. Let me reset that real quickly, and then you can riff on it. Here we have a situation where possibly you'd have to exclude 9/11 from this equation. I'm not certain, but white nationalists, white terrorists, basically, have murdered more people in the United States over the last couple of decades than have any other group. That's the largest component of domestic terrorism in the United States is white nationalists. And the Trump administration just declared that the Department of Homeland Security is going to basically disband their internal investigations into white supremacy and domestic terrorism because, as Donald Trump says, it's not a priority. Back to you, Sabrina.
Right. So for my paper for Sociology of Deviant Behavior, I'm doing it on white supremacy for that reason. And I found on the FBI's reporting database that there has been an uptick in about 2,000 offenders of hate crimes from 2016 to 2017.
Yes.
I was looking at the average, according to the FBI, on their website, they have like a database, where they track hate crimes.
Mm-hmm.
And the number of offenders on average, specifically for hate, motivated crimes between 2011 and 2016 was 5,555, and it jumped up to 6,370 offenders in 2017.
Wow. So, yeah, I had seen statistics and articles about how when Trump got into the primary, hate crime began to creep up. When he got elected, it started to explode. And interestingly, and you'll have to Google this one, I don't have the story right in front of me, but I read it a few weeks ago from a credible source, that in those cities where Trump had held rallies, there was a measurable increase in many of those cities in hate crimes in the months immediately following his rallies. It's like he comes into town and stirs people up. So I mean, this is not a good thing, and it's not a good time for the Department of Homeland Security to say we're not going to look at white terrorists anymore. It's just not a priority. Sabrina, thank you for sharing that with us. Dave in Federal Way, Washington. Hey, Dave, what's up?
Hey, Tom, I have another theory about the Republicans in the health care debate.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it will work with Trump, though. He will shore up his base and maybe even get some other Republicans that are on the fence to firmly support him. But, I mean, I respect you because you are a religious man that seems very reasonable to me. And I have a bias. I am a Schopenhauer atheist, okay?
Okay.
I respect religion because I believe it's evolutionary, all right? There's really no way around it. I just don't believe in it. But the thing is I've noticed with, like, the meta share this is an alternative pool. This is an alternative pool that they're soliciting a lot on TV and on the radio.
You're talking the ones that are being promoted by the Christian mega church pastors, or is this something else?
Nope, it's the one, and they use all the same things. All right, they use all the same memes. Like if you can keep your doctor if you want to. Right. You're not going to be involved in any medical procedure that violates your Christianity, et cetera, et cetera.
So they're running insurance companies, but they don't call them insurance companies, so they're not regulated like insurance companies.
Yes, and what I believe is the reason why this is important to conservatives is I think it's indicative of an anomic crisis. We're in an epistemic crisis. I'm 90% sure on that, you know. But I believe we're also having an anomic crisis, and if I'm right, most civilizations don't survive that. All right. And the thing is like I said, I believe a lot of conservatives, they just want to use medical care, especially end-of-life stuff, to proselytize religion, to keep it valid, to keep it, firmly entrenched in our society.
Yeah, it may well be. Dave, my vocabulary isn't as large as yours. I'm not familiar with the two words that you use to describe those kind of crises. Give me a call on Friday and let's talk about what they are, what they mean, and why you think they're consequential, okay?
Yep, no problem.
Thanks a lot, Dave. Good talking to you. We'll be back. We're going to check in with Talk Media News in about 10 minutes for the news of the day. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
I'm sorry, did I say 10 minutes? It's about 4 minutes, yeah. About 4 minutes we'll have Talk Media News. Stick around. And welcome back. Karen in Fredericksburg, Virginia. Hey, Karen, thanks for watching Free Speech TV. What's on your mind?
Hi, Tom. First-time caller.
Thank you, Karen.
Thank you for all you do.
You're welcome.
I just have a really simple message. Back to your mini rant about how Republicans turn their message to gain support from the voters for the contract on America, Gingrich. My message is short and sweet. It's to the Democrats. It's all about the marketing. That's all anything is about. Forget the issues. Forget the pro, the con, the this is right, that's wrong. It's all, I think Democrats should put all their money into a high-powered marketing firm and start bombarding the TV stations continuously.
Yeah, Karen, I absolutely understand what you're saying. And as a guy who has started and built and sold 2 different advertising agencies in his life, that's me. Yeah. I agree. But here's the dynamic, and this is the problem. Republicans have nothing to sell, right? I mean, Republicans are interested in tearing down our government. They want to strip it down to just the military and the police, and do away with all this socialism stuff, like Medicare and Social Security and I mean, there are even Republicans who think we should privatize fire departments and public roads. So that's what they're about. And because they can't tell people that that's what they're about, I mean, they tell their rich donors that's what they're about, but they can't tell the average person that's what they're about. They have to turn to marketing. They have to use advertising and promotion. They have to have this slick packaging, like with the new Gingrich and his contract on America, or Nixon's secret plan, or now you got Trump's secret health care plan. They have to do that. Democrats, on the other hand, actually have substance. They're actually interested in governing and making the country work, and in fact, in making it work better for everybody, including rich people, strangely enough. And so the Democrats, coming out of this place of, pure heart and decent intent and actual plans, actual policy, the Democrats think, well, that should be enough. It should be enough for people to look at the fact that, we came up with this, this 12-point plan, and here's all the details, and so the Republicans are talking about benefits all day long. The Democrats are talking about features all day long. You have to have both in a marketing campaign. The benefits are what's in it for me. The features are what are the details. If you don't combine the 2 of those things, you don't have a high credibility sales pitch. And the Democrats don't get this. They always go for the features. They rarely talk about the benefits. The Republicans totally get it. They only talk about the benefits because they don't have any damn features.
Exactly.
So, anyhow, I used to teach this stuff. I mean, I was an instructor for the American Marketing Centers back in the late 70s, or the mid 70s, actually, 74, 75, 76, 77. And, you know, it has been one of the things. Yeah, it's been one of the things that just makes me tear my hair out when I look at Democratic campaigns. One of the people, by the way, who I think gets this, and increasingly this is spreading, was, you know, Bernie a couple of years ago. You know, he came out and he said, you know, here's the features, but let's talk about the benefits. Here's what's in it for you.
Yeah.
And the Progressive Caucus broadly gets that, and they're growing, and more of the candidates in this 2020 election. I'm not endorsing anybody. I think that we've got such a great field of people. I want to see how it shakes out. But increasingly, I'm hearing that kind of thing from them. Pete Buttigieg, you know, obviously Elizabeth Warren. They're talking about benefits and features. I think that's a good thing. Karen, thank you for the call. We'll be back. Hey, over at ThomHartmann.com, we've got some really cool stuff. A lot of people don't realize that we produce a daily newsletter, and Sue puts we call it Sue's Daily Stack on there, which is literally a link to every story that I've talked about in the show. So all the research is right there. It's free. We don't share or sell our subscriber list. It's you know, there's just it's there. It's there for you. And it's over at ThomHartmann.com. You can sign up for the free newsletter. You also can get my big picture take of the day, which is exclusively over at our website at ThomHartmann.com, as well as links to our videos, the book reports we typically do every day, all this stuff and more. It's all there at ThomHartmann.com. So check it out and sign up for our newsletter. I think you'll really enjoy it and appreciate it and find a lot of value there. We put a lot of work into this stuff. And you'll find it all right there on our website at ThomHartmann.com. And be sure to check out the newsletter and sign up for it. It's great.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Let's check in with Talk Media News and find out what's going on in the world today. This report brought to you by GoatsForTheOldGoat.com and Ellen Ratner's new book, Loving What You Do. On the line with us is the chief foreign correspondent for Talk Media News, Luke Vargas, joins us from New York. Luke produces a 2-minute podcast every day that you can easily track down on the web. Luke, welcome back. Canada successfully rolled out a carbon tax this week. How come this isn't even in the American news?
I know, it's such a big deal. You know when I think it's going to be in the news, unfortunately, it's probably later this conservatives sweep into power in New York. I'm sure that they will say that the reason that he lost is because he was embracing this crazy leftist environmentalist agenda. I think that's a very false attribution to his electoral fortunes. If
you got clipped out by what sounded like a waiting call, and I didn't hear who you were talking about. Was it Justin Trudeau?
Yeah, I can hear you loud and clear, so hopefully the connection is fine. So, yeah, I mean, look, let's not even get into that part. It's important to talk about what's actually been done here. Yeah. So this is an interesting carbon tax, which is going to be basically levied on fuel retailers. So anyone who's buying energy, be it coal to run some sort of home heating, if it's natural gas, or if it's going to the gas pump to fill up your car, you're going to pay for the carbon emissions that are caused by those fossil fuel sources. It's going to start at about $20 a ton this year, which means probably about $2 more for a gas top up at the pump if you've got a small car. I think about $3 if you have an SUV
for a tank full.
Yes, to fill up your tank, and this is going to triple by 2022 when at the broad level, it's $50 per ton of CO2 by 2022.
Now, is this?
I guess it's really.
Are they doing this where they rebate all that money to the consumers so that people can afford to pay for the gas, or are they? Is this going into the general fund?
So Canada is a provincial system, and so each state can decide to do this differently. As far as I understand it, in Quebec, for instance, most of this money is going to environmental spending at the state level, so whatever they think is a good way to, lower emissions. But in these 4 states that this was forced into practice yesterday, the money goes right back to people. So this is what you call a tax and dividend structure, and it's what a lot of sort of environmental economists think has been a really good idea, because the goal, and what's been so difficult with carbon pricing policies, is that you need to disentangle climate policy, what's good for the environment, from all of these very politicized discussions about the size of government.
Right, and you don't want it hitting the average working person. I mean, this is the mistake that Macron made in France. This was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back. We're going to do a carbon tax, but we're going to keep all the money.
Yes, exactly. One study that I saw in Canada says that about 70% of families, most of them on the lower percentage of household income, are actually going to make this per year. You're not like submitting receipts or counting up how much you're using. They basically you go in your tax rebate form, and there's a line there that says, how many people are in your family, and depending on that number, you get money back. And
so this is like the Alaska Permanent Fund.
Yeah, I think that's really, I was talking to Gilbert Metcalf, who's at Tufts, and just wrote a great book called Paying for Pollution. And he says this is really important because that sort of visual, the other tax cuts, carbon prices like this in the past have just sort of lowered taxes in exchange for the money that you're paying at the pump, but that's not visual enough that you actually want to see when you get your rebate, hey, here's like $400 back. And that actually reinforces good. And no one's going to you could spend all that money, I guess, on more gas, but most people aren't going to do that.
Sure. If it works, it could even be neutral. It could even be a small economic stimulus. I mean, it may end up, having a real silver lining to it. Meanwhile, the Saudis, this is on the front page of the Washington Post today, the Saudis are giving multi-million-dollar houses and multi-thousand-dollar a month payments to the 4 children of Jamal Khashoggi, the murdered Washington Post journalist. Is it working?
Well, it depends on what working is. I mean, one of the children wants to stay in Saudi Arabia, in Jeddah, and the other 3 kids live in the United States, and I think understandably don't want to go back to Saudi Arabia. The Saudis say, look, this is legitimate. This is what we do in this country. When people are the victims of crimes, we compensate them back. You don't usually talk about million-dollar homes. You don't usually talk about, as the Washington Post reports, a settlement in terms of tens of millions of dollars that they call blood money in the years to come. And I think it's also probably a ludicrous claim to say there's no attachments, sort of stipulations of speech that these people, that they have to, in exchange for taking this money, can't speak out against the kingdom. And I would say, just generally speaking, it's part of a pattern I think we've seen with Saudi Arabia, that it tries to sort of pay off problems. If it's not accepting refugees, well, they'll just send money to the UN. If it's, violations of child soldiers in Yemen, they create a new, fund at the UN to research children in conflict, all these sorts of ways of trying to, distract from the core issue. It's just more of the same, I think.
Yeah, because they're sitting on more money than God, and so they can do this. The thing I thought was really interesting is that the with the IPO of Aramco or whatever it was, this merger or sale, this enormous amount of money just went into the Saudi coffers, and they're using it to solarize the kingdom. I don't know if you saw that story.
I didn't. I guess that's one of the better things to do with that.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, they now have a goal of getting off fossil fuels, Saudi Arabia. It's incredible. Luke Vargas with Talk Media News. Thanks, Luke.
Thank you.
Great talking with you. We'll be back right after the news here at the top of the hour. Stick around. We're going to chat. We're going to get into what's going on Thursday. It's going to be fascinating.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
We say fight back!
Hey, over at ThomHartmann.com, we've got some really cool stuff. A lot of people don't realize that we produce a daily newsletter, and Sue puts we call it Sue's Daily Stack on there, which is literally a link to every story that I've talked about in the show. So all the research is right there. It's free. We don't share or sell our subscriber list. It's there's just it's there. It's there for you, and it's over at ThomHartmann.com. You can sign up for the free newsletter. You also can get my big picture take of the day, which is exclusively over at our website at ThomHartmann.com, as well as links to our videos, the book reports we typically do every day, all this stuff and more. It's all there at ThomHartmann.com. So check it out and sign up for our newsletter. I think you'll really enjoy it and appreciate it and find a lot of value there. We put a lot of work into this stuff, and you'll find it all right there on our website at ThomHartmann.com. And be sure to check out the newsletter and sign up for it. It's great. Our book today for the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Notes on a Nervous Planet by Matt Haig. This is from the chapter, well, it starts with the chapter, A Life Edit, on page 4. I was scared. I couldn't not be. Being scared is what anxiety is all about. The bouts are coming closer and closer. I was worried where I was heading. It seemed there was no upper limit to despair. I tried to distract myself out of it. However, I knew from past experience alcohol was off limits, so I did the thing that had helped before to climb out of a hole, the thing I forget to do in my day-to-day life. I was careful about what I ate. I did yoga. I tried to meditate. I lay on the floor and placed my hand on my stomach and inhaled deeply, in, out, and noticed the stuttery rhythm of my breath. But everything was difficult. Even choosing what to wear in the morning made me cry. It didn't matter that I had felt like this before. A sore throat doesn't become less sore simply because you felt it before. I tried to read, but found it hard to concentrate. I listened to podcasts. I watched new Netflix shows. I went on social media. I tried to get on top of my work by replying to all my emails. I woke up and clasped my phone and prayed that whatever I could find there would take me out of myself. But, spoiler alert, it didn't work. I began to feel worse, and many of the distractions were doing nothing but driving me further to distraction. And T.S. Eliot's phrase from his 4 quartets, I was distracted from distraction by distraction. I would stare at an unanswered email with a feeling of dread and not be able to answer it. Then on Twitter, my go-to digital distraction of choice, I noticed my anxiety intensify. Even just passively scrolling my timeline felt like an exposure of a wound. I read news websites, another distraction, and my mind couldn't take it. The knowledge of so much suffering in the world didn't help put my pain in perspective. It just made me feel powerless and pathetic that my invisible woes were so paralyzing that when there were so many visible woes in the world. My despair intensified. So I decided to do something. I disconnected. I chose not to look at social media for a few days. I put an auto response on my emails too. I stopped watching or reading the news. I didn't watch TV. I didn't watch any music videos. Even magazines I avoided. During my initial breakdown years before, the bright imagery of magazines always used to linger and clog my mind with feverish racing images as I tried to sleep. I left my phone downstairs when I went to bed. I tried to get outside more. My bedside table was cluttered with a chaos of wires and technology and books I wasn't really reading. So I tidied up and took them away too. In the house, I tried to lie in darkness as much as possible, the way you might deal with a migraine. I had always, since I was first suicidally ill in my 20s, understood that getting better involved a kind of life edit, a taking away. As the minimalist advocate Fumio Sasaki put it, there's a happiness in having less. In the early days of my first experience of panic, the only things I had taken away were booze and cigarettes and strong coffees. Now, though, years later, I realized that a more general overload was the problem, a life overload, and certainly a technology overload. The only real technology I interacted with during this present recovery, aside from the car and the cooker, were yoga videos on YouTube, which I watched with the brightness turned low. The anxiety didn't miraculously disappear, of course not. Unlike my smartphone, there is no slide to power off function for anxiety. But I stopped feeling worse. I plateaued. And after a few days, things began to calm. The familiar path of recovery arrived sooner rather than later. And abstaining from stimulants, not just alcohol and caffeine, but these other things, was part of the process. I began, in short, to feel free again. Most people know the modern world can have physical effects. that despite advances, aspects of modern life are dangerous for our bodies. Car accidents, smoking, air pollution, a sofa-dwelling lifestyle, takeout pizza, radiation, that fourth glass of Merlot. Even being at a laptop can pose physical dangers. Sitting down all day, getting an RSI. Once I was even told by an optician that my eye infection and blocked tear ducts were caused by staring at the screen. We blink less, apparently, when working on a computer. So as physical health and mental health are intertwined, couldn't the same be said about the modern world and our mental states? Couldn't aspects of how we live in the modern world be responsible for how we feel in the modern world? Not just in terms of the stuff of modern life, but its values too. The values that cause us to want more than we have, to worship work above play, to compare the worst bits of ourselves with the best bits of other people, to feel like we always lack something. And as I grew better day by day, I began to have an idea about a book. This book right here. I've already written about my mental health and reasons to stay alive, but the question now was not why should I stay alive? The question this time was a broader one. How can we live in a mad world without ourselves going mad? As I began researching, I quickly found some attention-grabbing headlines for an attention-grabbing age. Of course, news is almost always designed to stress us out. If it was designed to keep us calm, it wouldn't be news, it would be yoga or a puppy. So there's an irony about news companies reporting on anxiety while also making us feel anxious. Anyway, here are some of the headlines. Stress and social media fuel mental health crisis among girls, from The Guardian. Chronic loneliness is a modern-day epidemic, from Forbes. Facebook may make you miserable, says Facebook, Sky News. Steep rise in self-harm among teenagers, from the BBC. And on it goes. The book Notes on a Nervous Planet by Matt Haig.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back to the Thom Hartmann Program. We have been talking about Trump's secret health care plan, just like Nixon's secret plan to end the Vietnam War, or Newt Gingrich's scam in '94 with his contract on America, and most of the points in it pointed to a piece of legislation that just simply cut taxes on rich people. I mean, the Republicans have a long history of these scams. We'll get back to that conversation. Also, the Department of Homeland Security has eliminated their domestic terror unit because, hey, white nationalist, white supremacist terrorists are no longer a priority for this administration. Amazing stuff going on. There's so much in the news. We were talking with Luke Vargas about the Canadian government just rolled out a carbon tax. A lot going on. We'll get back to those things and to the other news of the day, but there's some fascinating stuff happening here nationwide right now that has to do with the release of the Mueller report. Those of you who are regular listeners know that I've written a series of articles over the last month or three about Bill Barr and how back in 1992 he was the Attorney General who specifically when George Herbert Walker Bush was being subpoenaed to turn over his diaries that would have implicated him in Iran-Contra, and is definitely in the sale of weapons to the illegal sale of weapons to Iran, and perhaps even in the 1980 part of it, in the pre-election part of it. Bill Barr was the guy who said the way to stop this investigation is to pardon Elliott Abrams, to pardon Caspar Weinberger, to pardon Ollie North, pardon all these guys. And Bush took his advice and screaming three-line, all-caps headline on the New York Times, December 26, 1992, or maybe it was either Christmas Day or the day after, screaming headline, massive cover-up, right? It was Bill Barr who organized that. And so anyway, we've been talking about that, and that is, and I've been pointing that out, that this guy is the cover-up guy, right? This is what he does for Republicans. What he's done, in fact, he was covering up for himself. William Safire in 1992, I just retweeted the article, talked about how Bill Barr himself was going to be indicted in this case. And so he got himself out of it as well because he shut down the investigation. And Lawrence Walsh, who was the special prosecutor, went nuts and said this is a cover-up. I mean, front page of the New York Times. How quickly we forget, right? So it looks like I think he's doing the same thing all over again, frankly. And I think his plan is to say, no, I'm not going to give you the report. It was done by the Justice Department. I'm the head of the Justice Department. I can keep it, under lock and key. Congress will subpoena it. He'll refuse the subpoena. It'll go to the courts. However the courts rule, it'll end up before the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court could take up to a year, and you got 5 right-wing wackadoodles on. It may be after the election before we see this thing, if Bill Barr has his way. And the one thing that can blow that up, that didn't happen in '92, the last time Bill Barr tried to do one of these cover-ups, and did it successfully, massively. The one thing that can blow that up is if enough people show up in the streets, is if public opinion turns on him. If the American people rise up and say, hell no, we want to know what's going on here. Was our country hijacked by a foreign power? Do we have a president who's not working in the best interest of the United States, but rather working for somebody else? Do we have criminals in the White? What the hell is going on here? Zet Pekanis is with us. He's on the line. He is the spokesperson for TrumpIsNotAboveTheLaw.org. It's a coalition of other groups, including Move On and People for the American Way and Public Citizen and others. The time to act, the nationwide protests are planned for, I believe, Thursday night. You can tweet Zach at Zach_Petkanas, Petkanas. And I just went to the website, TrumpIsNotAboveTheLaw.org, and plugged in my zip code and discovered. And Zach, welcome to the program, by the way.
Oh, thanks. Thanks for having me on.
It's a pleasure, and I just want to tell people this is so cool what you guys have done. I just went over, plugged in my zip code here in Portland, Oregon, and boom, Vancouver, right across the river. There's where it is, when it is. 1,100 people signed up. There's a whole bunch of them in Portland to have 2, 3, 700, 1,069 people already signed up to say we will be in the streets. Tell us about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I just want to appreciate your intro to this, because I think so many in the mainstream media are getting it wrong about what's happening right now related to this report. You can turn on CNN and even sometimes MSNBC, and it seems like Bill Barr has agreed to release the full report, and that is simply not true. Bill Barr, in every single interview that he's given, every single letter that he's written, every communication with members of Congress, he has said that he refuses to commit to releasing the full report. And what's happening is that we have House Democratic leadership led by Jerry Nadler in the House Judiciary Committee and Adam Schiff, the chairman of the Intelligence Committee. They have given Bill Barr a deadline of tonight, saying that if you do not release this full report and the underlying evidence by tonight, tomorrow we will begin the process to subpoena. And we, in the grassroots, the American people, we are going to take to the streets on Thursday if this deadline gets passed tonight. And what people can do is there are 2 ways to figure out where a protest is near you. One is to go to the website, TrumpIsNotAboveTheLaw.org. And as you say, people can go and put in their zip code and find an event near them. The events are going to happen around 5 o'clock local time. There'll be some leeway, probably about half an hour on either side, depending on the location. But you put in your zip code, you RSVP for an event, and then you'll start getting communications from the host about exactly where it is, when it is, what to bring. With you. There are over 200 events that are currently scheduled. There are more being added every single day as people find out about it and start hosting them in their own locations. But we need a real show of force to tell Bill Barr and to tell the Trump administration that it is not acceptable for them to redact a single word of the Mueller report. And we're going to go out on the streets on Thursday, and we're going to tell them that nationwide.
Amen. Amen, brother. I mean, this is so important, because this guy successfully covered up Iran-Contra, which may well have been like Nixon blowing up the LBJ's peace talks in 1968. The president of Iran, President Bani Sadr, who now lives in the United States, who was president in 1980, is on the record. I mean, there's a piece in the Christian Science Monitor about how the Reagan administration, actually, this was part of their plan. They had the Iranians hold the hostages so that Jimmy Carter couldn't win re-election. Major crimes committed by the Reagan administration. And George Herbert Walker Bush had to cover this up. He had to put a cover on it because he was involved in this stuff. And he brought in Bill Barr to do it. And now Trump is in a similar situation, major crimes, or at least, it looks like it. And he brought in Bill Barr to be the cleanup guy.
That's exactly right. I mean, he is Mr. Cover-Up, and you just have to look at the letters that he put out so far. The Mueller report, we know, is close to 400 pages long. So what does Bill Barr do, Mr. Cover-Up? He puts out a letter that's a summary of 4 pages long that puts the best possible spin on it for the Trump administration. It defines collusion so narrowly that it probably would exclude Vladimir Putin from the definition. But it's silent on things like non-criminal evidence of collusion, like the Trump Tower meeting that senior Trump campaign officials had with Russian spies, the secret real estate deal that with the Kremlin that Donald Trump was pursuing during the 2016 election. Paul Manafort, the campaign chairman, giving internal strategy memos to Russian military intelligence, or Roger Stone acting as a conduit with WikiLeaks at the behest of the Trump campaign. None of this is covered in Bill Barr's summary. It is absolutely covered in the Mueller report, and that is why you are seeing the Trump administration and Donald Trump today on Twitter, talking about how, initially he said, "Oh yeah, let it all out. I want it all to be out there in public." And now, when it looks like some of it actually may come out, he's changed his tune, and he's saying he doesn't want it to come out, and attacking the Democrats for calling for the information to come out. There is a reason why Bill Barr is slow-walking this report coming out. There's a reason why the Trump administration is attacking the Democrats for calling for the full report of this report. This report is bad for the Trump administration, and they are going to hide it until we go out there and demand it, which is why people need to go to TrumpisNotAboveTheLaw.org to find a protest near you.
Go. In 1992, one of the most respected journalists and op-ed writers in America was a guy named William Safire. He has since passed away, but I'm an old fart. I used to read his stuff. It was brilliant. And I'm looking at an article that he wrote in the New York Times in 1992. And just a couple of sentences from it. Barr's strategy, he was the Attorney General, has been to stall past December 15 when the law authorizing the independent counsel expires. Republicans recently filibustered its extension to death. And then he goes on, but the cover-up general, this is how he referred to Bill Barr. He called him the cover-up general. This is William Safire. I mean, but the cover-up general may be overlooking the Senate's understanding of its prerogatives. If the Senate Judiciary's official call is rejected, Chairman Joe Biden is prepared to consult with Chairman Boren. And he goes on through this whole thing. Joe Biden was trying to stop this thing and couldn't stop it. I mean, it's just, this guy, Bill Barr, knows what he is doing. He knows how to hide the crimes committed by Republicans. He has done it before. He is doing it again. And we need to be in the streets on Thursday. If the entire report is not released to Jerry Nadler and Adam Schiff tonight, we need to be in the streets on Thursday. TrumpIsNotAboveTheLaw.org is the website. Zach Pecanis, am I saying it right, Zach?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Can I also just say one thing? If people text Mueller, M-U-E-L-L-E-R, Mueller to 21333, they'll get information about how to sign up for a protest. That's Mueller to 21333.
Great. And is there a Twitter handle?
There is just the website, because it's run by a lot of organizations. So you should go to the website or text the number. Okay,
and the number again to text the word Mueller, M-U-E-L-L-E-R, to was again?
It is 21333.
21333. Great, Zach. You're doing God's work. I really appreciate it, and thank you for coming on the program and talking to us about it. And good luck.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Keep us up to date on how it all goes.
Absolutely. See you guys Thursday.
Thank you. Yep. Talk to you before then, I hope. Zach Pecanis, who is the spokesperson for TrumpisNotAboveTheLaw.org. Check it out. It's 18 minutes past the hour.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Defending America from the conservative weapons of mass deception. Thom Hartmann here with you. We'll be right back. And welcome back. Travis in Centerville, Virginia. Hey, Travis, what's on your mind?
Semper Fi, get ready for impeachment. Hey,
okay.
Tom, this might be we can actually be a little bit enthusiastic because this might be history repeating itself. Burr helped a one-term president get away with crime. So this might be history repeating itself, that this is just going to make us more enthusiastic about making Trump a one-term president.
Oh,
so
that's...
all our fellow liberals need to keep that in mind.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Although this, Barr's final nail in the coffin was after the election. The election of 1992 was in November, and Barr did this in December. So, Bush Sr. had already lost to Bill Clinton, and all this, although Barr had been Attorney General for quite a while at that point in time, and this is, back, in fact, the Sapphire piece I was reading was from, as I recall, September. In fact, let me just go back and look at the exact day. It was from October 19th of 92. That was before the election, that William Sapphire was calling him cover-up General Barr. And so, yeah, spot on. We'll see. We'll see. I hope you're right, Travis, from your lips to God's ears, as they say. Thank you very much for the call. Tom in Seattle. Hey, Tom, what's up?
Oh, hey. How's it going?
Good. Thanks for listening to KBCS. What's on your mind?
Well, I was just thinking it might be a decent idea. I was listening to Democracy Now! This morning. I only heard the last 15 minutes of it, but they were talking about health care, and they were interviewing a guy, Adam Gaffney or something. Anyway, he did a pretty good job, I thought, of fielding the questions, but they were giving him some really good specific questions about Medicare for All. And I thought it might not be a bad idea to do a mock-up. I mean, fund some sort of a, everybody that's on board, put together something where you can actually log in your actual numbers and figure out what your costs will be. And,
interesting. Like the mortgage calculator things, where you plug in the interest rate and the price of the house and it tells you what your monthly payments are.
Yeah, I mean, my premiums are $720 a month for me and my two girls, and we could put in whatever we pitch in each month, or whatever your employer is,
Yeah, well, if you figure 20% of that right off the top is going to profits for the health insurance company, so that with a Medicare for All system, the cost of overhead administration with the federal government with Medicare is around 2%, so that you're going to save 18% right there. And then, if we can get control of drug prices by having the government be able to negotiate drug prices, like the Pentagon does, or the Veterans Administration does, or all the big health insurance companies do, then you'd save more money depending on how many medications you use. So, that's
be specific though. So you can log in your actual numbers, so there isn't a vague, I wonder what it's going to cost me in 2 years when it goes in or whatever.
Yeah, like the mortgage calculators.
It's not free. It's it's going to be taxed. We're going to have to pay for it. So what's it going to be?
Yeah. And another thing that would be a nice companion piece to that would be how much does it cost in other countries? In Canada, I've had Canadians call in and say, I pay $140 a month for my entire family, or had one guy call in and say he pays $210 a month for his entire family. Somebody else said that they pay nothing because they're low income. It would be interesting to see what the spread is in other countries that have single-payer healthcare systems or similar programs.
You look at construction worker in wherever.
Yeah, in Saskatchewan. How does it work? Yeah, good. That's a great suggestion, Tom. I hope somebody who's in a position to do something about it is listening. Great idea. And thanks again for listening to KBCS. We'll be back. It's 22 minutes and change past the hour. Hey, over at ThomHartmann.com, we've got some really cool stuff. A lot of people don't realize that we produce a daily newsletter, and Sue puts we call it Sue's Daily Stack on there, which is literally a link to every story that I've talked about in the show. So all the research is right there. It's free. We don't share or sell our subscriber list. It's it's there. It's there for you. And it's over at ThomHartmann.com. You can sign up for the free newsletter. You also can get my big picture take of the day, which is exclusively over at our website at ThomHartmann.com, as well as links to our videos, the book reports we typically do every day, all this stuff and more. It's all there at ThomHartmann.com. So check it out and sign up for our newsletter. I think you'll really enjoy it and appreciate it and find a lot of value there. We put a lot of work into this stuff. And you'll find it all right there on our website at thomhartmann.com. And be sure to check out the newsletter and sign up for it. It's great.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
And welcome back. We've been, as I said at the opening of the hour, over the last 3 hours here, we've been talking about Trump's secret health care plan and what that means. We've been talking about Khashoggi and the murder of Khashoggi. It's a 6-month anniversary or near to that. And it looks like the Saudi government is paying off his kids to keep quiet. Canada just rolled out a nationwide carbon tax. That's a big deal. We've got Bill Barr, cover-up General Barr, what he's up to. The Department of Homeland Security has shut down their domestic terror unit because it's just not a priority. White people killing people, not a priority. White terrorists, we don't care. Tennessee just knocked 128,000 kids off their insurance. This is an amazing story. This is in the Nashville Tennessean by Brett Kelman. Tennessean.com is the website. Like so many others, Heather Hance found out the hard way that her son's health insurance had vanished. Hance, 44, a Tennessee single mom whose 6-year-old son Harrison has autism, moved into a new house last summer, then called the state government to provide her new address. It was critical, she knew, that she update her son's file at TennCare, the Medicaid program that provides him with essential care. On the phone, she got devastating news. Her son no longer has TennCare. I was horrified, she said, because I knew exactly what was going to happen next. Over the next month, Hance's fears came true. Without TennCare, she could no longer afford to send her son to therapy that helped with his speech, dexterity, and self-esteem. Soon he began having meltdowns and sobbing fits at school. They transferred him across town, blah, 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 blah. She said it was a catastrophe. This is what Republicans do to health care. This is just in Tennessee, 128,000 children. The Republicans just said, screw you. This is the Republican Party's message to all of us, is to hell with us, right? We're just disposable people. We're not billionaires. Only billionaires and multimillionaires in the Republicans' world should have, really good health insurance. Everybody else, hey, you got to have some skin in the game. You got to be afraid. You got to be concerned. You got to be worried. If you're not really worried, then you won't buckle down and work for the oligarchs for $6, $7.25 an hour. I mean, this is literally how they think. This is literally how they think. That skin in the game, this old phrase that they, and just Google it sometime. I did an article about this a few months ago. This shocking meme that poverty somehow causes motivation to people, unless you're rich. For rich people, if Paris Hilton wants to sit around on her butt, by the pool waiting for her dividend check to arrive, she should have a low tax rate for her capital gains because, after all, she's a job creator. But if a working person, wants some kind of benefits, don't even think about it, right? You've got to prove that you're either trying to get a job or do have a job, or you're performing community service before you get food stamps, before you get health care, because you've got to grovel for those government benefits because the billionaires paid their taxes and they don't want that money going out to anybody except them. We'll be back.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Your call's up next. It's 27 minutes past the hour. For our book club today, we're reading from a book by Elizabeth Holtzman, one of the former U.S. Congresswomen who sat on the committee that considered impeaching Richard Nixon. And this book is titled The Case for Impeaching Trump. Just came out. This is from the first chapter titled Impeachment. When Donald Trump's presidential election victory was announced in the early morning hours of November 9, 2016, like many Americans, I rubbed my eyes in disbelief and dismay. Two questions raced through my mind. What had become of America that a man so unfit, so small-minded, so mean-spirited could be elected? A man whose ethnic and racial bigotry had set the stage for his presidential run when he called Mexicans rapists and made racist birther attacks on President Barack Obama, whose vulgarity and misogyny were laid bare in the Access Hollywood tape when he bragged about forcibly grabbing women by their genitals, whose performance at presidential debates showed him not only flagrantly ill-informed, but manifestly unwilling to get informed? My second question was about how much harm this man would do to America as its 45th president. I have my answer now to the latter, less than 2 years after the election. President Trump has damaged American democracy far more than I would have guessed. He has refused to protect our system of free elections from foreign interference. He has relentlessly attacked the administration of justice, in particular the investigation into a possible conspiracy with Russia regarding the 2016 presidential election, putting himself above the rule of law. He has failed to separate his personal business from the country's, flouting the Constitution's requirements. And he has violated the constitutional rights of the people in separating children from parents at the southwest border without due process of law. And to cover up these misdeeds, he has systematically lied to and assailed the press. These are great and dangerous offenses that the framers of our Constitution wanted to counteract and thwart. They provided a powerful remedy: impeachment. Many tremble at the word, fearing how President Trump's supporters will react to an impeachment inquiry, worrying that it will only further polarize an already deeply divided nation, or that there will not be enough votes in the Senate to convict him if the House of Representatives votes to impeach. Just calling for an inquiry will be viewed as a Democratic Party attack on the head of another party, a kind of coup d'etat. It's easy to find reasons to be anxious, but I'm not afraid. As a junior congresswoman, the youngest ever elected at that time, I served on the House Judiciary Committee that voted to impeach President Richard Nixon for the high crimes and misdemeanors he committed in connection with the Watergate cover-up and other matters. Through thorough, fair, and above all bipartisan, the committee acted on solid evidence presented in televised hearings that riveted the nation, handing us the blueprint for how impeachment can be successfully pursued today. In our 225 years of constitutional democracy, the Nixon impeachment process has been proven to be the only presidential effort that worked. Though Nixon resigned, the only president ever to do so, 2 weeks after the committee's impeachment vote, he did so to avoid the certainty of being impeached and removed from office. We became a better nation for having held the president accountable. All of which raises two further questions. Should we be considering the impeachment of President Donald J. Trump? Will we again become a better nation by pursuing that option? To answer, we need to set aside President Trump's unremitting attacks on the environment, on our close allies, on the Affordable Care Act, and any disagreements we have over policy, as well as any personal animus, and simply ascertain whether he has engaged in the kind of egregious conduct that would meet the constitutional standards for impeachment and removal from office. This means we have to focus sharply on his potentially impeachable offenses. In doing so, we will find it useful to compare them, when possible, to similar offenses by President Nixon, found to be impeachable by the House Judiciary Committee in 1974. Here is a list of some of President Trump's potentially impeachable offenses developed as of this writing. A possible interference with or obstruction of the administration of justice and an abuse of power. On May 9, 2017, Trump fired FBI Director James Comey, who is investigating both his national security advisor, Michael Flynn, and Russia's connections to the Trump campaign in connection with influencing the 2016 presidential election. 2 days later, President Trump admitted to NBC's Lester Holt that Comey's firing had to do with that, quote, Russia thing. In other words, President Trump acknowledged that he was trying to shut down the FBI investigation into his own possible conspiracy with Russia. Flynn has since pleaded guilty to lying to the FBI. The Comey firing uncannily echoes Nixon's firing of the special Watergate prosecutor for seeking highly damaging information about that president, a brazen defiance of the rule of law that triggered the start of impeachment proceedings against Nixon. A second possible interference with or obstruction of the administration of justice and an abuse of power. President Trump has persistently and publicly attacked those heading the Russia investigation, including Special Counsel Robert S. Mueller III and Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, and has repeatedly condemned Attorney General Jeff Sessions for recusing himself, suggesting that he wants to fire any and all of them in order to get control of the Russian investigation. He actually did give an order to fire Mueller. A failure to care that the laws are faithfully executed is required by the Constitution. To try to deflect public concern about his possible role, well, it continues from there. The case for impeaching Trump by Elizabeth Holtzman.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
In Our Times by David McCraw. Well, some fascinating stuff in the news. Julian Castro just became the first candidate, the first 2020 candidate, to put forward a comprehensive immigration proposal. This is big stuff, and a fascinating story. Donald Trump has gone from a week ago saying, "Oh yeah, let's put the Mueller report out. I don't care, it's just fine," to now saying, "Well, those Democrats, they will never be happy. Nothing will satisfy them. They to hell with them. They don't need to see the report." He suddenly doesn't want anybody to see the report. Maybe Bill Barr sat him down and said, "Psst, here's what's going on. Here's the report." And Trump goes, "Whoa." So, be sure to check that out. Daily Kos is running their straw poll. It's only been up for about 40 minutes, 30 or 40 minutes. But right now, who's your choice for president 2020? Bernie's at 35%. Pete Buttigieg is at 17%, number 2. Elizabeth Warren and Kamala Harris are tied at 14% each for number 3. And then everybody else is 5% or below. Beto is at 5%. Joe Biden's at 5%. Unsure is 4%. Amy Klobuchar 2%. Jay Inslee 3%. Cory Booker, Julian Castro 1% each. So it's fascinating. I don't think today is the day to do it. But we'll get to a straw poll of our own here and find out what you all are thinking as things go along, and we'll do it on a more regular basis. Mark in San Francisco. Hey, Mark, thanks for listening at 9:10 a.m. What's up?
Oh, Tom, thanks for the newsletter. I get it every day. I really appreciate it.
Oh, great. You're welcome. And thanks to Sue Nethercutt, who puts the thing together every day. It's a labor of love for her, and she does a great job.
Tom, what I want to talk about is where the Democrats have leverage in the health care dispute is they have the Green New Deal, which they are promoting clean air and clean water, where we have the polluters, the Republican Party, who want to poison the air, poison the water. So who's really the party that you want to trust with health care? I think that's the message the Democrats have to lay out.
Well, and I would put it on a larger time spectrum, Mark. I mean, go back to the 1960s. Who was it who was opposing the existence of Medicare when it was first proposed in 1964 by Lyndon Johnson? It was the Republicans. Who was it who recorded a 33 LP, a 30-minute long rant about how if we went to Medicare, that would be the first step on the road to socialism, which, and someday we'll look back and say, I remember when America was free. That was Ronald Reagan. I mean, the Republicans, who was it who fought against Social Security in 1933 and 1934? Well, I guess it was 35 Social Security was passed. Who was it who called Social Security communism and socialism? It was the Republicans. Who was it who campaigned for the House of Representatives in 1997, or 1979, on a singular campaign of privatizing Social Security and ending Medicare? George W. Bush. I mean, it's like the Republicans forever have been opposed to Americans getting any, quote, benefits, any, being paid off by the socialist government. This is the Republican meme. So, of course, you don't want to trust the government or the government health care or any kind of health care, frankly, to Republicans. They're just looking for how they can screw people and make some money for their billionaire buddies.
Tom, you said it once. You said it all when you said the Republican Party is a scam. And that's all it is. It's a big scam.
Yeah, it really is. It's the official front group for the billionaire class. Mark, thank you for the call. Very well said. I appreciate that. And thanks for the shout out to our newsletter. Every day, every story I talk about, Sue puts the link to the original news source for that story in our newsletter. So you get Sue's daily stack every day. It's pretty remarkable. Richard in Calumet, Michigan. Hey, Richard, what's on your mind today?
Well, I went on that website you had up here to find out where an event was happening in our area, and I think the nearest one is about 500 miles away.
Really? In Michigan?
Yeah, I'm way up in the Keweenaw Peninsula.
Oh, okay. Yeah. The website, by the way, is Trump is not above the law.
Nothing makes it up here except for right-wing garbage.
Yeah.
Well,
you can start
we're
one.
in desperate shape.
You can start one. By the way, the website is trumpisnotabovethelaw.org.
Yep, and I looked at it and typed it in, and like I said, I'm trying to get people active. I talked to you guys, Free Speech's supervisor, and I worked out a deal of getting some stickers and some things to start putting up around up here because my best friend is the head of our Democratic Party, so...
That's great.
We're going to do what we can.
There you go. And trumpisnotabovethelaw.org. You can not only sign up for one, but you can also create one. Richard, good on you. Thanks for checking it out. Craig in Gresham, Oregon. Hey, Craig, what's on your mind?
Hi, Tom. I've been listening to you ever since the first time you were in Portland here. And I just want you to know your show is not only entertaining, and it's also educational, and we all thank you for that.
Thank you
for what you do.
And thanks for listening on Progressive Voices.
I wanted to relay an incident that happened to me that you might not find surprising, but perhaps some of your listeners will. My family and I were on vacation in Germany, which I think you lived there for a while, so you should know.
Yeah.
But one of my daughters cut her hand on some glass on the top of her hand. It was about an inch-long cut, and it was a deep cut, and it was bleeding profusely. We bandaged it up, grabbed a taxi, and said, take us to the closest emergency room, and he did. And when we walked in there, all they wanted to know was they wanted to look at my passport number, and they wanted to know my home address. And my daughter was seeing a doctor in 10 minutes or less, and he stitched her hand up, bandaged it, everything. Sent us on our way. They said they'd send us a bill. So about 2 months after we got home, I got a bill from them. I opened it up, and I was very surprised. It was for a total of $30.
Holy cow.
It was amazing. I felt like sending them more. If they can do it, we can do it.
$30. Was it broken out? Was that like the cost of the bandage or something? Or was that just, that's the deductible for an emergency room visit?
I don't know what it was for. That was all we ever had to send them, though. It just covered everything.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was amazed. It was you can't walk into an emergency room here for $30.
No.
So, if they can do it, we can do it. We just got to find the right way.
Amen. We're just as smart as the Germans, and or at least we should be. I mean, we've got the Republican Party weighing us down, right? And the Fox News viewership kind of tilting the curve here, but. We can do it. Craig, thank you. That's a great story. I appreciate you calling and sharing it with us. Michelle in Panorama City, California?
Yes, it is.
Oh, okay. I thought maybe it was a typo and it was Panama. Okay, what's up, Michelle?
No, it's Panorama. Yeah, it's part of Los Angeles.
Oh, okay. What's on your mind?
Mm-hmm. Well, there were kind of two things. One, I wanted to reply to the caller who had inherited the funds. I'm an accounting professional, so not a lawyer, so they need to...
Michelle, if I may interrupt you just for a second, because people tune in and they tune out, and probably a lot of people listening right now don't know what you're talking about, so I'll just recap it real quickly, and then you can give your advice. This person called in and said he was a type 1 diabetic and had been since he was in the 4th grade, and his insulin's very expensive, and it's covered by his Medicare, or Medicare, or Medicaid, I guess. And that his mother died and he inherited 400 acres. This is out in rural Iowa, which is worth $400,000. And suddenly the government says, you're a rich man now, we're not going to cover you anymore. And all he's got is an annual property tax liability. He doesn't have cash. And he was like, this is a terrible thing and we need to talk about it. And I agreed, and I said it's even worse for end-of-life treatment for nursing home care that's covered by Medicaid. And so now you want to weigh in on this.
Yes, I do know that, again, each state might have some stipulations, but there are trusts that if you do have some kind of condition or are not capable of handling things, there are trusts that can be set up for the benefit of somebody, and that way it does not affect their benefits that they get from the government. So basically somebody else is in control of the money.
Right, and that's what we were told when my mother, and now this was in Michigan, and I don't know if this is state or federal, but when we were looking at the possibility of her going into a nursing home, The story was she has to be broke or Medicaid will not pay for it, and we're, nursing homes are expensive, and to get her, and she has to. So we would have had to take the house that she lived in and the Dad's book collection and the antiques that they had collected throughout their lives, which probably in total it was worth maybe $150,000. All of that would have had to have been sold and spent. You can't just like give it to your kids or something. Although I suppose you could put it in a trust, but then there has to be a 2-year period where you're impoverished before you qualify for this. So you're saying plan in advance? Is that basically it?
There's in advance. There is our trusts that can be set up that are for the benefit of somebody. Right. So if somebody's a disabled person, mentally disabled, and they're never going to be able to handle any money or do that, and they're on government assistance, and there are trusts that can be set up to somebody else basically is control of that. If something happens, they're the ones who basically would be the one.
But the bottom line is that the beneficiary, the person receiving the benefits, has to be impoverished.
Well, right, but this way they don't have to have nothing there. So if the gentleman had diabetes, he could have, if they knew ahead of time with the family, they could have set up a trust where somebody else would have control of the assets. It's a specific kind of trust, and then anything from those assets, he can have the benefit of those assets or other things, but he will not lose their benefits.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. Of the government benefits.
I get it. Michelle, thank you. That's it's good information. And if you're in a situation like that, check it out. Michelle, thank you so much. Frank in Caldwell, Idaho. Hey, Frank, it says here you want to disagree with me. About what?
Well, you're talking. I'd take exception to your statement that the people shouldn't have to work for the benefits they get.
Okay. Why?
Why? Why should the American taxpayer support people that's not willing to work?
Why is work your criteria? Is that the only thing that makes people decent? What about somebody who's caring for their children at home? Do you think that a person who is raising their kids at home shouldn't have access to health care or education in the United States?
No, I don't think any. What do you mean decent? I'm talking about people that's too lazy to work and support themselves.
Yeah, right. Do you know any of the Frank? You're defining people's worth by their willingness or capability to work. This is the problem that you have, like in Tennessee, or in many of these red states where people are being thrown off health care, Medicaid health care for poor people. They're being thrown off because they can't find work.
What?
Yeah.
How can you say that?
Well, because it's true.
I don't understand
but beyond that, Frank, I don't care if somebody's working or not. If somebody's a human being, they should have the basic human dignity. They should have access to health care. We should not say to people, are you a good person or a bad person, before we decide whether to give them penicillin. That seems to me like the most unchristian, selfish, greedy, SOB, awful thing that I could imagine. I don't understand why you would support a position like that, Frank. That's bizarre.
Okay, where's your idea that the government's supposed to come up to me and take my money and give it to somebody that's not willing to work? Where do you get that idea?
Frank, you're defending this position that a person who is a human being should be denied health care.
How many people do you support?
You're defending a position that is anti-Christian. You are defending a position that is anti-human. You're suggesting that before a person is able to get health care, they should have to prove their worth. That is sick, Frank. You are one sick, twisted guy.
Prove their worth ain't got nothing to do with it.
That is absolutely twisted.
They should pay for it themselves.
And if they don't have the resources? If they're not wealthy, if they weren't born rich, if they weren't born middle class, if they weren't born, come on, Frank. Have some humanity.
What gives you a right to take?
Frank, what would Jesus do?
Not willing to work.
Frank, what would Jesus do?
I don't care what Jesus would do. I'm telling you.
Okay, so yeah, we get it. A, you hate Christianity. You're not Christian. B, you hate humans. And C, you're a selfish, twisted old man. Frank, give it up. I'm done with you. It's 48 minutes past the hour. We'll be back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
So I understand the devil's running a single-payer health care program down in hell. Frank's in for a real hell of a shock. And welcome back. David, excuse me, in Naugatuck, Connecticut. Hey, David, what's on your mind? Thanks for watching us on YouTube. What's on your mind today?
Hey, I just wanted to point out two quick things. And even though I was only 7 years old, in my opinion, health insurance started really going down after Richard Nixon signed the HMO into law.
Yeah.
The Kaiser Foundation.
Yeah, in the early 70s.
And the second thing is, I think it's really the most deceptive thing about health insurance is this 80-20 rule, where health insurers get 20% of the pie.
Right.
So what they've done is they've allowed, with no cost controls, they've allowed costs to go unchecked, so that their 20% is a bigger pie, just like with defense contract spending.
Yep, exactly. Yeah.
And then Goldman Sachs a year ago wrote a report, and they pointed to hepatitis C being cured.
Mm-hmm.
That if cancer was to suddenly be cured, then health insurance would be unstable, in their opinion, which I think is sick.
Yeah. Well, it is an industry. My old friend Don Hoy, who ran this organization called the Creative Health Institute, he used to say every cancer diagnosis is a $250,000 boost to the economy. You know, it's and this was back in the 80s. It's probably $1 million now. And in fact, when my wife had breast cancer, you know, she was pushing, and this was just as the Affordable Care Act was kicking in. She was pushing up to that lifetime limit. The insurance company had already notified her that they were getting ready to cut her off. I mean, this is.
People used to have to change jobs.
Yeah. Well, it's yeah. I mean, there's you know lots and lots of ways. If we go back to how things were before the Affordable Care Act, there's lots and lots of ways that people just get totally screwed by the health insurance industry. It's a terrible thing. Thanks a lot for the call. Roger in Berkeley Springs, West Virginia. Hey, Roger, what's on your mind? Thank you for watching YouTube.
Hello, Mr. Hartmann. I really enjoy your show.
Thank you.
And that certainly was some call with Frank. But the reason I'm calling is earlier on your show, you had a gentleman that came on and used the term epistemic crisis.
Yes.
And you said you were unfamiliar with the term.
Yes.
And I believe that the word comes from epistemology, which is part of philosophy, and I believe it means knowing the truth. Basically, that you know, we have referees, so to speak, such as intellectuals and scientists and everything that people commonly refer to as knowing the truth, and that with the rise of right-wing media and the split in the media, that we are not dealing with the same facts anymore.
So it's a crisis of belief.
Right.
Or a crisis driven by belief in things that aren't so.
Right. And it is that, you know, there is a lot of conspiracy theories on the right, the Pizzagate and all of that sort of thing.
Right.
And that we are not dealing with the same facts anymore. And epistemology is knowing the truth.
Yeah.
So it is a case of, and the other word, I had it written down, but I misplaced it. But the other word had to do with deaths of despair crisis. That a lot of people, that
despair?
There are a lot of deaths of despair. Yes.
Yeah.
That there are a lot of crises that way too. So those were the two terms that the gentleman was using.
I think that was Dave from Federal Way. Yeah, thank you for that, Roger. And, you know, I look forward to Dave calling in later on, too, and kind of catching up on that. But and it's always nice to add words to my vocabulary. You know, I know epistemology, but that was a new one for me. Roger, thank you so much. Epistemic. We'll be back. It is 52 minutes past the hour. Hey, over at ThomHartmann.com, we've got some really cool stuff. A lot of people don't realize that we produce a daily newsletter, and Sue puts we call it Sue's Daily Stack on there, which is literally a link to every story that I've talked about in the show. So all the research is right there. It's free. We don't share or sell our subscriber list. It's you know, there's just it's there. It's there for you. And it's over at ThomHartmann.com. You can sign up for the free newsletter. You also can get my big picture take of the day, which is exclusively over at our website at ThomHartmann.com, as well as links to our videos, the book reports we typically do every day, all this stuff and more. It's all there at ThomHartmann.com. So check it out and sign up for our newsletter. I think you'll really enjoy it and appreciate it and find a lot of value there. We put a lot of work into this stuff, and you'll find it all right there on our website at ThomHartmann.com. And be sure to check out the newsletter and sign up for it. It's great.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Oh, welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and Russ in Fort Myers, Florida. Hey, Russ, thanks for listening to Sirius XM. What's on your mind today?
Hello, Tom. Nice to talk to you again.
Thank you.
I had dinner with you one time in D.C. A number of years ago when you were still there. So anyway,
nice.
Listen to your show. I just wanted to comment again because I hear so many people calling into your show about how terrible the healthcare is overseas. I've lived in Germany for a couple of years, and we traveled there a number of times, and I've got to say my wife ended up in the emergency room in Florence with a severe bladder infection due to exhaustion and dehydration, and we didn't know what the problem was. She was in the emergency room at 2 in the morning. She had an MRI, a CAT scan, all kinds of heavy sedatives for her pain, and they watched her and they flushed her out with fluid and all that.
Yeah.
And
this is Florence, Italy, Russ?
Yeah, Florence, Italy. And we left with paying nothing, and we got our bill about 2 months later. CAT scan, MRI, and all the heavy drugs that they gave her, the bill was under $200.
Yeah.
So like the guy said before, I was happy to pay it and would have paid him more. So, and I've been in the hospital in Germany. We've been in Italy. So anyway, I just got to agree that we're making too much money.
There you go. Yeah, well, we're making too much money for the healthcare billionaires. That's what's going on. Is all that money is going to the healthcare billionaires. Russ, thank you. Thank you for sharing your story. That's a brilliant. Johnny in Lamarck, Texas. Johnny, you got the last call of the day. We have a little less than a minute. What's up?
Yes, sir. I'm a longtime contributor to a volunteer advocacy and policy organization in Texas called Healthcare for All Texas, HCFAT.org.
Right.
It's part of the Physicians for National Healthcare Program, PNHP.
Great.
And the last time I looked at that website, we have a calculator. So you can go to HCFAT.org and plug in your personal financials, and then it'll show you what your savings would be under universal health care.
Oh, interesting. HCFAT, as in foralltexans.org?
Oh, yeah, Healthcare for All Texans.
Yeah, Healthcare for All Texans. Johnny, thanks for sharing that with us. That's great. And that's exactly what that caller was calling about and saying, hey, we should have such a thing. Apparently, it's already been done. It's remarkable. What a day. I learned so much from my list, from you. Thank you so much for teaching me and for everything, just keeping this thing rolling and for sharing our stories with your friends and getting people to the various ways that you can hear our program. Thank you so much. And don't forget, what a day today, huh? Don't forget, you got this thing coming up on Thursday, and check that out at TrumpIsNotAboveTheLaw.org and tag You're It. Get out there, get active. We'll see you tomorrow.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit ThomHartmann.com.